Let Me Go, written by SlyKitsune. Casterly Nakahoshi paced hurriedly around her bedroom, packing essentials, picking up toys, and dodging plastic pop gun pellets being fired by her hyperactive little girl all at once.
Pow pow, now you're hurt and can't go to the airport. Gotta stay with me, Mommy.
Cass hated when Harumi used puppy eye persuasion. It was her greatest weakness. She grabbed her heart and slid down the wall in the most dramatic way. Ugh, you got me, kid. She slumped over a bit, anticipating the sound of worried little feet jumping off the bed and running to make sure she hadn't really hit her mark. Just as Harumi was within arm's reach, Cass grabbed her up and hugged her tight. I love you so much, but Mama still has to go to the airport and bring Grandma Catlin home from the hospital. Harumi turned around to face her mother, this time with large tears welling up in her big, bright red eyes. She was a perfect mix of Cass and her husband Haru. Long dark brown hair pulled half down, half up, and topped off with a small red bow in the back, pouty lips, and eyes like her father's, and a cheery, magnetic personality that could melt the iciest of hearts.
But I'll miss you lots,
Harumi said through tears. I miss Grandma, my mommy, the same way you'll miss me, and it'll only be for 2 weeks, sweetheart. You'll have Daddy and all your stuffed toys to keep you company while I'm overseas, and I promise to be back before your first day of—
Don't say it! I'm a fairy princess, and fairy princesses don't need school!
Harumi wriggled and writhed until she was out of Casterlin's arms and darting through the apartment. Cass leaned her head back against the wall and sighed. Explaining hospitalization, healthcare, traveling visas, and mandatory schooling to an innocent fairy princess wasn't something she could bring herself to do. And so she went back to packing, knowing full well her husband was getting an earful about how unjust she was for not taking Harumi with her to the States. The truth was, Casterlin had left her mother's home on bad terms when Catlin Queensguard had scorned the pregnancy and announced their marriage back when Haru and Cast were still university students. Cast had been studying abroad through a ridiculously expensive exchange program when she fell for Haru. The couple managed to scrape by together after Kat decided to cut Cast off completely. On account of Kat's blatant disapproval, it was needless to say they'd barely spoken since. She'd only ever seen photos of her grandbaby through email and had only ever heard her voice over the phone. She was too stubborn, too set in her ways to use real-time messengers and the like. But that never bothered Harumi, which was a great relief to both parents. Kat never let on that she was going to use this unfortunate event to make amends and ask forgiveness during their last phone conversation, but that's exactly what she intended to do. Several hours later, Cass said her final goodbyes, trying to play it cold when she walked toward the boarding area after breaking the fierce grip Harumi had on her hand. She could still hear the little girl's whining and wailing echoing behind her. 2 weeks were nothing in the grand scheme of things, and it wasn't as if she'd never see them again. She shook her head to clear the creeping guilt, found her seat, and opened a romance novel she'd never had time to read. Several pages in, just as a battle raged between the hunky protagonist and a wicked hag, the spell of the story along with Cass' deep concentration were broken by a soft-spoken passenger. Miss, is this seat 2B? I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses. Oh no, you're fine. Here, let me see your ticket. Yeah, looks like we're seatmates. Cass smiled and extended her hand for a quick shake, but the woman sat down excitedly. Oh, thank God, I'm so relieved. I embarrassed myself in the airport by almost sitting in someone's lap, and my anxiety levels are through the roof. I was in a hurry, so I probably left them back there. Are your reading glasses yellow with daisy patterns? Yeah! What are you, psychic? That's amazing! Cass smiled again, reached up, pulled the reading glasses off her new acquaintance's head, and handed them to her. Found them for you. The woman blushed and introduced herself as Chisei Nakamura. The two exchanged stories for the first few hours of the flight and found they had quite a lot in common. Just as Cass had followed her dreams in the fashion industry to Japan, Chisei was headed to America to pursue a solo singing career, starting with a talent search audition in Burbank, California. There were slight differences here and there. Chisei had her parents' blessing and full support, whereas Cass had neither at 22. Her original path to modeling at 18 had morphed into a management and ownership position at her own high-fashion retail clothing company by the time she was 24. Now at age 28, she felt proud and content with her lot in life. Running a business alongside the perfect family left her with no regrets. Once she patched things up with her mother, she'd feel truly satisfied and complete. She was sure of it. After indulging in Chisei's stories, the two exchanged numbers in social media. Casterlyn showed off pictures of her two most favorite people in the world and was having a great time until she realized she was homesick already. "Oh, Mrs. Akahoshi, your makeup is running. Hold on, let me get you some tissues." Chisei wasn't used to soothing others when they cried, but she did her best. "I'm sorry, I didn't think it would hit me this hard. I'm such a big baby. Please excuse me, I'm gonna go freshen up a bit." "Chisei? May I call you Chisei?" She knew it was a bold thing to ask of someone she'd just met, but she'd found a kindred spirit in this aspiring young songstress and just couldn't help herself. Chisei was a bubbly teen who luckily took no offense whatsoever, but refused to call Cast anything less than Mrs. Akahoshi, due to her strict upbringing and sincere wish to be respectful to those with age and wisdom on their side. As she headed to the restroom, she felt a wide array of emotions, but she promised she'd hold it together upon meeting face-to-face with Catelyn. "No tears," she chanted to herself. "No tears, only smiles." She lifted the mascara wand up to her lashes, slid some balm across her lips, and reached for her favorite applicator in the set, her eyeliner pencil. Before she could finish the winged look for her left eye, her pencil began to shake violently between her fingers. Her initial thought was turbulence, but this was more an onslaught of tremors than anything else. Before she could utter a single word, she was whisked away in a cylinder of blinding gold light. When she hit the ground, her knees buckled hard. She winced before opening her eyes to see the dark and dreary remnants of a castle outstretched before her. Where there once might have been bustling bazaars and city folk, now ran wild with goblin creatures, snakes, and three-headed vampire bats. Once her vision focused completely, Casterlyn noticed the girl sitting atop a red throne. Long platinum silver hair coiled into a tight bun atop her head. One piercing lilac eye peeked out from behind her overlong side-swept bangs. She wore a crown of black thorns and a gown of crow's feathers. When she stood from her throne, it cracked and snapped and whined until Casterlyn realized it was made up entirely of human bones, and that the red coloring wasn't the red paint of a glamorous gothic movie set, but blood. "Where am I?" Cast asked timidly. "None may speak before they are spoken to in the presence of greatness such as mine, you insolent fool." The girl was attempting to sound intimidating, but alas, the high-pitched sound of her voice gave her away to be no older than 14 years old. This did nothing to ease the fight-or-flight adrenaline rush coursing through Cast's veins. "I was on a flight, thousands of feet in the air. What is going on here?" The only plausible explanation that came to her racing mind was alien abduction. The strange youth giggled. No, nothing like that. I am as human as you are, though my rank far surpasses yours, I assure you." A telepath? Now Cast was wondering if her drink had been spiked by a flight attendant, or a crazed passenger, or even her newfound comrade. "Again, no, I simply summoned you here of my own accord, as Empress, Queen, and glamorous ruler of the Kingdom of Crown. I wield and possess abilities the likes of which an earthbound woman such as yourself would never understand." The girl huffed a triumphant, snooty sound full of confidence and pride at her proclamation. "I need to go back. If you know what Earth is, then send me back the way I came." The girl faltered for the first time. You will address me as Empress Fierna. Crown is mine to rule. Everything you see before you belongs to me. This glorious capital city, the stalls, the stallions, the citizens." The Kingdom of Crown lay in shambles, no more than a shadow of its former brilliance. Cast had no idea what had become of this place, but her gut told her she'd be better off not knowing. And at present she didn't want to know anything other than how to get back onto her flight. "I can't tell you how to get back there. I didn't think the legends of your world were true. I'm just as shocked to have you here as you are, you know. But since you are here, I must make use of you as intended. You will champion the beast fiends of this world on my behalf, and once you've attained enough strength, you will bravely face the final fiend. It has no name, but it is the key to unlocking my final gift and sending you back whence you came. The legends say it is so, and so it must be." "You brought me here on a whim?" Based on what? Some bedtime story you read? Where am I? Tell me what you know, kid. I have a family waiting for me, so if this isn't some hidden camera show or a movie set or whatever, you need to prove it to me right now.
You talk big, but you're scared. I can hear the fear in your subconscious voice. But if you must be made to believe, then I shall strike fear into your heart. Be warned, as a royal, I have but one magical restriction brand on my forehead. See? She pushed her bangs up to reveal an odd symbol seared into her skin. It looked as if it were perpetually burning, as if the brand had only been placed there a moment ago. It pains me not, fair lady. And without warning, Fiona raised her right hand and shot a black and purple swirl of fiery energy right past Cass' head. The magic hit so close, it singed a couple of hairs from Casterlin's usually perfectly sleek, shoulder-length bob cut. She didn't have to speak aloud to convey that she most definitely believed Fiona's words. She tried to envision a brick wall before bolting into the city ruins. She was lost in a strange and dark place with a magic-wielding maniac hot on her heels. Please wait! I don't want to hurt you, Mama! Mama? The word echoed in Casterlin's mind. It was such a shocking word to hear that it stopped her where she stood. Ma'am, miss, ma'am, please wait, Fee said through ragged gasps. Ah, so she had misheard her after all. Never mind the fact that she had the ability to blast Casterlin's head to smithereens, being called Mama by anyone other than her daughter, felt bone-chillingly wrong. She knew she was addressing a powerful being, but she couldn't help herself when she said through gritted teeth, "Don't ever call me anything other than my name, you psychotic little brat." Fee, too, had stopped cold in her tracks. Cass braced herself for another blast, but was instead stunned to find Empress Fiona on her knees, crying like the little girl she truly was. "I'm sorry, please forgive me, don't leave me, I don't even know your name yet," she said through heavy sobbing. Casterlin's heart sank. This child was lonely. It was plain to see and easy to understand why in a desolate land such as this. Motherly instincts overrode her sense of danger as she stepped forward toward the little girl. That lilac eye shot up, fear-stricken. An audible gasp, then another bolt of elemental energy, black-purple lightning this time, shot from Fiona's hand. A sickly green goblin twitched and jolted in a heap at Casterlin's heels. "You saved me?" she whispered. Fiona nodded. "So now will you listen to me, please?" Cass was already leaning forward to wipe away her Royal Highness's glistening tears. "Yes, tell me everything." Several hours later, Fiona lay sleeping soundly with her head in Casterlin's lap. She was grateful for this quiet moment. She wouldn't be able to process what she'd just learned otherwise. Dimensional rifts were real, not science fiction. Dimensional rifts connecting one world to another were also real. In the Kingdom of Crown, a book of legends based on ancient exploration records suggested that a mythical blue planet could be synced with this one, the purple planet Odensai, to summon forth he whom the sovereign ruler deems worthy to fulfill his deepest desire. Fiona, who'd lost her mother to a terrible plague several months prior, had longed to fill the ache of loneliness in her heart. She would not open up about what happened to the citizens of Crown, but Cass came to the conclusion that dark sorcery was involved, that the unnamed beast fiend was no work of fiction, and that she had to take the situation seriously if she had any hopes of ever making it home. Once the young Empress had rested up, she informed Cass that it was time for training. Though Casterlin explained over and over that she wasn't any sort of battle-hardened champion, and that no such perilous threats existed on Earth quite like the beings she'd seen here so far, Fiona would listen to none of it. And so on they went. They walked and walked through the bleak, medieval-looking terrain. Cass' imagination ran wild after seeing the goblins and other bizarre creatures skulking around the miserable castle she'd been teleported to earlier. God only knew what else was out there, waiting to pounce at any moment. Even worse, the skies had clouded over. "I'm not asking for much," she thought to herself. "Just a simple flashlight would do. A torch is a no-go, as the princess might see it as a threat. I sincerely don't want to alarm the only person capable of getting me safely back to the plane." "Oh, I know you'd never dream of hurting me, Miss Casterlin," Fiona said with an innocent smile. Casterlin's spine tingled when the girl proceeded to hug her arm as they walked.
This child was probably afraid to be alone, relieved to have another person to talk to, surely. But even still, she could neither control nor understand the meaning behind her internal recoiling. She could forgive the girl's usage of miss, as she was yet unaware of Cass's husband and child left behind. Or if she could read Cass's thoughts, maybe she did know, and simply didn't care. Before she could wrap her mind around her odd reaction, though, she was stricken by the sudden flood of light coming from her eyes. A small, murky puddle illuminated beneath her. Fearing she was going blind, her anxious attempts to stop the incredibly strong beams of light spilling from her eyes was nothing short of horrifying. Her eyes had become no different than the flashlight she'd just wished for. Fee gasped delightedly at the sight and squeezed Cass's arm. "You will become a fine champion, Miss Casterlin. You already have the gift of light within you. You have not been placed under the seal of magical restriction, thus I expect greatness from you henceforth." "How do I make it stop?" Cass asked in a panic. "Wish it to be so, and if your mind is strong enough, the magics will heed your call. However," Fee glanced sidelong at Cass, knowing full well her words would terrify the earthbound woman even more. Though Fee tried to feign a liking for Cass, she simply could not control the sight of herself. Her cruelty would always triumph over her loneliness, and so she continued. "Wish it to be so with a weak mind, and the magics will tear you asunder. Oh, but not right away, of course. They'll tear at your mind ever so slowly, a crack here, a rip there, until you go mad and begin to maim yourself. By the time you realize the magic has taken effect, it will be far, far, far too late." Cass grasped at her eyes, seeing only her daughter in her mind's eye. She tried to remember, forced herself to remember every tiny detail about Harumi's face. When she focused on the dimples that appeared whenever Harumi smiled, the sweet sound of Harumi's voice calling out to her, the white light disappeared and her vision was restored. She stopped where she stood, kneeling in the pouring, thunderous rainstorm, and sobbed. I just want to go home. Why me? Why in the world did I have to be here? Why did it have to be me?" "Silly woman, you are a privileged wielder of magics locked away from most. You should be grateful." Cass paid no attention to Fee, prompting the princess to kneel, grab Cass by the chin, and continue in exasperation. "There are 3 certainties in this world: death, taxes, and magical restriction. Nobles and commoners have a seal placed on their foreheads at birth that regulates when, where, and why they are allowed to use certain elemental magic. Royalty such as yours truly are exempt from such restrictive usage, as we are born and bred to rule. If, say, the weather offends me—" She paused for dramatic effect before snapping her fingers to part the heavens, revealing a bright blue sun-filled sky. Not a drop of rain in sight. Cass looked away, unable to maintain the forced eye contact between them any longer. Fee did not like that. She didn't like it one bit. "If, say, a subject of these lands displeases me—" A spark of black-purple flame manifested on the tip of her index finger. She pointed her finger and thumb at Cass as if it were a gun. Cass tried so hard to hold her composure, but in the end her body betrayed her. Fierna smiled. Seeing Cass so visibly shaken brought her a profound joy she hadn't felt in a long time. To divert the child's aggression, Cass decided to ask her about magical restrictions. Feeling pity for the oh-so-stupid woman before her, Fee cheerfully explained, "Children born of crown, nobles and peasants all are given special brands to seal their magical abilities. Some may be taught to oppose the kingdom. Well, it's an empire now, you see, and we simply can't have that. We simply cannot have opposition, or so said Mommy when she was alive. She disagreed with it at times, though personally I find it to be a truly beautiful idea. As royals sitting on clouds far above all others, we are akin to the gods, and no one should ever face off against a god." She narrowed her eyes at Cass. "Don't you agree?" Cass nodded her head slowly, knowing full well this child thought far too highly of herself, more like a politician of her world than the fairy tale princesses she read about with Harumi. She kept her thoughts well hidden before the brick wall she now held steadily in her mind's eye at all times. Electricity is an ability only royals and castle staff were aware of. Though staff was taught with great strictness to keep it to themselves upon leaving the grounds, we also have the village children bound by contract to join hands in arranged marriage upon reaching adulthood, daughters of water with sons of fire and vice versa, to keep a steady populace to reign over,
Every few decades, those subjects are given audience with the ruling sovereign to have a seal removed from their brands. Fire or water at age 10 for basic cooking and medical treatment. Earth at age 20 for agriculture. Wind at age 30 to fend heat waves and keep the mills running. Ice at 40 to keep butchers in business. Only royals are privileged enough to eat meat. Nobles are given the leeway to do so at parties and such. Peasants must live on the things they grow themselves. The last element we choose to bestow, light, is given at the age of 70, though many never reach it. Lightning is ours to wield alone and must never be given outside the royal bloodline. To do so incites instant death. Cast winced. By beheading, Fee added flatly. You have one seal. Unlocking this will help me to help you. With my superior intellect and your fighting prowess, we'll surely find a way to— No, take me home. Please, my daughter needs me. Fee returned Cast's desperate plea with a sweet smile. You only ever realize you're having a pivotal, life-altering moment after the moment's passed, but it scarred every passenger, even if they wouldn't realize it in the years to come. The regal aura was not lost to their sleeping sixth sense when she had boarded that plane. They all felt something. They all heard an inner voice. This woman's path is about to change. Watch her, protect her. But they had all chosen to disobey that nagging feeling in favor of the idle time-wasters such as food, drinks, books, and any other form of escapism that would ease the tension in their muscles, the tickling sensation of greatness at the back of their necks. But how could they have known this woman would be taken into her nightmare? How could they know how powerful destiny truly was? But in the grand scheme of things, it would be 18-year-old Chise Nakamura who would end up suffering the most immediate consequences in the disappearance of Casterly Nakahoshi. Haru and Harumi most assuredly weren't exempt from the pain of loss, and Catelyn would forever regret those 6 years of silence. Yet there they all sat in separate interrogation rooms, speaking with American police. Normally, the husband would be prime suspect material, but a woman vanishing mid-flight with no trace of evidence forced the spotlight directly onto our sweet, innocent pop idol in training. And the onslaught of hate, the swarms of media vultures circling her home for a juicy story, they would only destroy her more and more each day until she found herself seeking refuge in a hospital ward, feelings of guilt and shame swallowing her up like dark magic. Begging to go home only seemed to thrill Fiona more and more, and so Cass changed course yet again, desiring not to argue but to find food and a quiet place to rest instead. How could a champion fight on an empty stomach, she reasoned, and so, knowing she had instilled fear into Casterly and now had full control over her, Fiona bade the woman stay put in the grasslands where she sat, while she teleported away to gather what Cass prayed would not be her last meal. But the thing about Cass was, she couldn't just sit still. Even if it resulted in punishment from this crazed little princess, Cass still felt a sense of awe and wonder at the concept of being spirited away to an entirely different world. She had adored reading fantasy novels all throughout her childhood, so to be stuck in a fantasy of her own meant exploring was absolutely necessary. Consequences be damned. So she stood up and started walking away from the castle and out towards a bleak and obliterated town. As she drew nearer and nearer to the town square, lovely flashes of beauty danced past her mind's eye, as if she were reliving a memory. These images were bright and sunny. Children laughed, court jesters juggled, and minstrels sang like angels. A happy daydream. Each flash flooded Cass with an odd nostalgia, and it all felt so real. It was only when the sound of crying filled the air did the warrior-to-be snap back to her senses. There in the town square, a goblin child sat beneath the gallows wiping tears in vain. Casterly felt no fear and slowly approached. When she was close enough to extend her hand, the child sat straight up with wide eyes. No hesitation, the little one squeezed Cass' hand tightly, and they both fell into a trance. Unlike the vivid flashes from moments earlier, Cass found herself dreaming from the perspective of a mysterious blonde woman. Reflected in a grand bejeweled dresser mirror was her body with Cass' soul peering through from inside. Oddly, being in this body felt natural to her, comfortable even, like slipping into an old, well-worn pair of sneakers or jumping into the bed of your childhood home. Being there, wherever there was, just felt right.
The blonde woman was putting the finishing touches of makeup on her face, neck, and arms when a lovely young woman in maid attire appeared at the door behind her. Peeping from behind the maid's skirts was a precious little girl, a miniature version of the woman she clung to. "Drizelda, Tatiana," Cass said like an old friend, shoving the makeup hastily into a drawer. "Your Majesty, I beg your pardon, but Tati was worried about you and asked if she could read you a bedtime story." "You really should be lying down, Highness." "That's very sweet. Come sit with me, Tati." The tiny maidservant's face lit up, and after receiving an approving nod from her mother, the cute little cherub dove onto the bed next to her queen. She began to read the upside-down book aloud to the queen's delight and Drizelda's amusement. She fell asleep 2 pages in. Drizelda lowered her head in apology and swiftly moved toward the bed to scoop her daughter up, but the blonde woman insisted the maid sleep in the royal bedchamber while she took to the maidservant's quarters. "Unheard of, Your Majesty." But Cass put a foreign finger to her lips and headed off to sleep in the commoner's bed. Once there, she closed her eyes and the scene melted away. When Cass came to, she was herself again. The goblin child had released her grip and collapsed to the ground. A pool of blood welled up from the hole in the little one's chest. A larger goblin rushed over. Low sounds of unintelligible agony rushed forth. The child's mother, perhaps? They both knelt down on either side to stop the bleeding. The unfortunate consequence of having their hands touch was yet another trance. This time, Cass was seeing everything from a third-person point of view, as if she were watching a film. A teacup shattered against a large and beautiful tapestry. Vierna screeched at Drizelda. "I'll make it properly this time, Princess. Please don't whip Tati again. She's so young and so small. She's done nothing to you. She doesn't understand why she gets punished for my mistakes." "The tea is as cold as ice, you stupid wench. Bring her to me, right now." Drizelda, trembling, shook her head. "No, no, Princess. I will not subject my baby to your psychosis any longer." "I'll have you hanged." "So be it. Guards!" The film then shifted yet again, and Cass's awareness moved right along with it. Now she was forced to witness the tragic scene of Drizelda post-hanging as the sun sank low behind the gallows. Scene shift. Cass glimpsed the blonde woman yet again. This time the scene took place in the middle of the night. She looked tired, sickly, and terrified. She handed something small and wrapped in a black cloak to a tall and slender manservant. Cass knew it was Tatiana. Once again she'd come to. Back within the confines of reality, she'd realized too late that the goblins before her were the manservant and child from her visions. The goblin she'd assumed to be the little one's mother had turned out to be Tatiana's widowed father, desperately searching for help to lift their curse. They both lay on the cobblestones, bleeding out. After several agonizing moments, the goblins' bodies dispersed into a ray of dazzling, fragmented light to show their true human forms. Footsteps slowly approached before stopping next to Cass, causing a shadow to loom menacingly over them all. "Vierna, how could you? Why? Why did you shoot them?" Vierna stood silently smirking over her kill, but uttered not a single word. After watching the goblins turned human get slaughtered, the warning bells inside Cass' head turned into her own screams. The threat of death was as real as the magic this crazed princess would wield to execute her with. But what had she done? She had only lived an ordinary life. Her joy, her purpose, found in being a caring daughter, a strong wife, and a loving— "Mother, be silent! Your cries!" Vierna warped to Cass, suddenly gripping her hair tightly, her other hand covering Cass' eyes. "Pierce my ears!" She flung Cass ever so cruelly to the ground. Pointing an invisible trigger right between her eyes, she shouted, "Bang!" And all went dark for Castellan Akahoshi. Some days later, she awoke with no realization any time had passed since the first night, when Fee had explained her actions and the grief behind them before falling asleep on Cass' lap. And there Fee was, in the exact same position she'd fallen asleep in. Cass had a nagging feeling of déjà vu, but her heart was far too moved by this child's plight to think anything of it. "This is just like an MMORPG, she said to herself as she looked around, except the slimes are usually cute, unlike these things. A purple, gelatinous monster with fangs, bat wings, and sharp red eyes glared at her indignantly before bounding off into the distance. "If it bothers you, kill it," Fee said as she rubbed the sleep from her eyes. "Is it dangerous?" "Doesn't look like it's bothering a soul. I mean, yeah, we're the only people around, but you get my point." "It
will make you stronger. You want to become stronger, don't you, my hero?
A little off topic here, but if royalty is born with infinite elemental magic, why do you have a restrictive seal? And why do the brands look so...
The magic one human being possesses, the magic all living beings might possess in this world, is finite, depending on your usage, skill level, and ability to deplete a lifetime's worth, given dire circumstances. But if used correctly, one could achieve immortality if one so wished. No one ever has, as far as the history books tell. As for the harsh, grotesque appearance of the magical restriction seal, it is a reminder and a punishment of sorts. It reminds those of low status that with great power comes even greater responsibility, and if used wrongly, greatness can be taken away in an instant. Mine is forever burning because my misuse of this particular element incurred grave consequences.
A brief silence fell between them.
I grow weary of this incessant rambling. You cannot become my champion unless you hunt. We will continue this discussion once you've chosen a decent weapon and reached an adequate stopping point in your training.
A broadsword 3 times Casterlin's size manifested above Fiona's head as she chanted with both arms held high.
Take this.
The sword moved swiftly through the air, landing delicately in Casterlin's hands. So much for choosing a decent weapon, Cass thought with a tinge of bitterness hidden behind that sturdy brick wall. But as she lifted the hilt, she was surprised to find that it felt as light as a toy sword one might find in the children's section of a second-hand thrift shop. Cass had always loved adventure RPGs back in her world, and so, whipping the sword up with both hands, she stood and chased after the harmless slime. She swung her broadsword in the same pose as her favorite first reality character. The fat slime let out a sad little sound as it split down the middle and dispersed into black particles that disappeared as quickly as they'd formed. Cass couldn't help but feel disappointed. There was no elaborate fanfare, no confetti nor music. She had swung her sword onto her back in a dashing, heroic fashion, but without the bells and whistles. What was the point? Shouldn't a level up symbol appear to congratulate me for my efforts or something? It's like that in most video games where I'm from.
This is no game, champion, and surely you've considered that maybe the inner workings of Odensai are quite different from your world. You have to reach, level 10 to get your congratulations. So let us grind ahead.
With no recollection of the horrors she'd witnessed earlier, Cass found herself excited to hunt monsters. She'd always hoped to live long enough to enjoy the perks of virtual reality gaming, but this experience was even better. Or at least it was in theory. In truth, the death rattle from each creature was excruciatingly painful to hear. A white-hot pang of dread and guilt shot through Cass at every swing of her broadsword. On their travels, Casterlin had tried her best to describe the wonders of video games to the perplexed princess. Her favorite part of leveling up was the moment when a golden ray of light would appear above her username. 2 fluffy white feathered angel wings would open at her back with heavenly music playing momentarily in the background. The level up symbol was akin to a heavenly blessing bestowed upon the player to increase their capabilities. She went on to explain the importance of skills and stats. Fierna seemed highly attentive. Around the time Cass had completed her summary, she took a heavy swing at a vampire bat with a long razor-sharp tail. Though not what she was expecting, a congratulatory coffin with bat wings on each side materialized above her head. 2 fluffy, black-feathered fallen angel wings adorned her back, and funeral organ music played to alert her ascension to level 10 and appeared every 10 levels thereafter. Try as she might, Cass knew she'd never get used to living this way, but it was around level 15 that she'd started reminiscing about her other favorite aspects from the first reality franchise, a series she'd been shamelessly addicted to on Earth. So she thought she'd throw the word into the air and see where it would land her. Summons.
Summons? Are you referring to the way in which I brought you to Odensai?
Cass hung her head. Ah, so you don't have them then. Bummer. Fierna perked up, suddenly eager to please Cass.
Explain them to me that I may better understand.
Summons, familiars, comrades, magical amplifiers. Many games had many names, but a summon was a summon regardless. A creature of mythical origin brought up by magical incantations to aid a protagonist in their greatest time of need. Fierna was fascinated by the idea of summons, even pouting that she'd never thought to ask for one before the plague took hold of Crown.
We shall stop and make camp for the night. While you rest, I will fulfill your desire for a summon. This is an order to rest, not a request.
Caste was far too tired to protest, and even though her curiosity was beyond piqued, she obeyed. Before long, she was fast asleep, dreaming of her life back on Earth. Meanwhile, Fiona had teleported back to the remnants of her castle and had gone underground to a secret stairwell leading to a hidden door. The pilots were well off and obviously came from prestigious families. They'd bribed their way out of the investigations. They may even have been part of this conspiracy to make Mrs. Akahoshi disappear. These negative thoughts came from a place of resentment and despair on Chisei's part. That fateful meeting with Casterlin had ruined her career, destroyed her life. Unintentionally or not, Cast had taken the will and passion to live from Chisei. Being optimistic all her young life gave Chisei just enough energy to seek help from a renowned psychiatrist. But on the tail end of her 7th session, the voices and visions began to torment her from out of nowhere. "Jump, Chisei. You killed me. You know you did. Just jump. The guilt will go away. But you have to climb. You have to jump." The voice of Casterlin was an echo in her mind that grew stronger and stronger with every action. Chisei hid in a supply closet surrounded by all types of medical instruments. Among all the shining, sharp objects, she chose to tie several gurney belts together to form a makeshift noose. She positioned a bath chair beneath the overhead light fixture, threw the noose around one of the solid white pipes built into the ceiling for ventilation, and stood there. She tried to kick the chair away, but she just couldn't do it. She removed the noose from her neck, hopped down to the floor, and walked back out into the main hallway until she came to stand in front of the nearest open window. She began to fantasize climbing to the top of the highest building in the center of the city. In the dead of night, she could see cameras blazing in her direction. Ah, stardom! Oh, fame! Finally, everyone was looking at her with eyes of concern instead of accusation. She would make the cover of every magazine. Every big news outlet in the country would know her name. Maybe her jump would garner worldwide acknowledgement, just like she'd always wanted. And she wouldn't be overshadowed this time. Not this time. Or maybe there was another way to get that delicious, obsessive attention she craved. One she could enjoy and relish in and stay alive to witness. It would surely cement her unproven guilt, but a few days after her secret attempt in that little cramped hospital closet, Chisei checked herself into a mental ward against her psychologist's advice anyway, claiming she could fly. Only hours into her stay in the ward, Chisei started seeing Casterlin everywhere. Silent at first, no words, just a finger to her lips and a beckoning smile. Her other hand ever pointed upward. Eventually, her voice would call Chisei's name late into the night. "No more medication, silly. You can't be drowsy during your big debut. Chisei, Chisei." The voice became so constant, the visions so frequent in the daytime, that Chisei couldn't resist her curiosity anymore. So she snuck out and headed to the roof of the new establishment. Casterlin gingerly beckoned her to stand on the roof's edge. What a radiant and charming smile! Who could resist? And so Chisei moved toward the ledge, her white gown flowing dreamlike in the wind. "Now face me." Casterlin pulled Chisei into a motherly embrace, so warm, so gentle. "Bliss awaits you," Casterlin whispered into the young idol's ear before shoving her out into the chilly night. Chisei snapped to her senses, but when she blinked, the face of the culprit had changed to a child, wearing crow's feathers and a blood-soaked crown. Harumi stared at the empty casket where her mother's body was meant to be laid to rest. At 6 years old, she hadn't really quite grasped the concept of death. Sure, she'd missed the occasional festival goldfish, flushed forever into the waves of obscurity. But being told her mother was gone wasn't something she could easily accept. She had been so desperate to keep her mother from leaving for that flight. Maybe she had angered her mother more than she realized. "Did Mommy leave because I was bad?" she asked, looking way up into her father's tear-stained eyes. Haru knelt down and, saying nothing at all, squeezed her tight. "Your mother would never, and I mean never ever, leave you like this on purpose." Catelyn stood in the doorway of the bleak funeral home, looking exhausted. Harumi buried her face into Haru's chest, then looked up at her estranged grandmother and timidly asked, "How do you know for sure?" Catelyn moved to kneel beside them. "Because she chose you over me. Because I forced her to choose between us. Kat burst into tears. This is all my fault, and I'm so sorry. I asked her to come back to me, Haru. I just wanted to make amends with what little time I have left. She wanted to make amends with you as well, Catelyn. She was so excited to see... Wait, what do you mean with what little time you have left? I don't understand. Kat looked at him with so much regret and sorrow in her eyes that Haru knew he was about to receive another blow to the heart. He wanted to disappear like his wife had in that moment, somewhere safe and quiet and peaceful, where no more sad news could reach him. But Kat had waited so long to tell someone of her secret battle that her words rushed out towards Haru before he even had the chance to brace himself. Stage 3 lung cancer. Chisei's bones shifted under her skin. The pain was so intense that she lost consciousness. It was only for a second, but in her mind she saw her entire life unraveling, unfolding, rewinding at twice the normal speed of a cinematic movie. The last image, her birth, burned like a film strip before her eyes. It blazed into a flash of white light, roared into a clash of horrendous, monstrous, blood-curdling screams. The imagery, sights, and sounds overwhelmed her senses to the point of becoming momentarily blind and deaf. Once she was finally able to open her eyes again, she lost all sense of her humanity. She was being enveloped in a circle of golden light, and though her thoughts were primitive and instinctual now, she felt the urge to look into the glass of the nearest hospital window. Her body was pure white and scaly, snake-like from the waist down. Her torso was that of a human woman, but her face was otherworldly, truly alien, grotesque, enough to frighten her into looking away. Sharp teeth hid beneath her mint-green lips. The hair atop her head trailed into a mane that reached to the tip of her tail. Her reptilian eyes, save for the blood-red slit pupils which sat within, matched her lips and hair perfectly. The golden light overtook her, and then the next thing she knew, she was in Crown, staring at a sleeping woman. She did not recognize her, nor did she have any thought in her head but to obey.
Congratulations, hero! In celebration of your hard work, I present to you this Lamia. She will do as you bid. You can conjure her at will.
Casterlyn rubbed the sleep from her eyes and stood to get a better look at the massive winged creature staring her down with cold, animalistic eyes. She reached out to touch, but pulled her hand back once she noticed the Lamia's fangs.
Sit. We shall feast for now. Afterwards, you can practice conjuring your new summon to see what she's capable of.
Cass looked deep into the Lamia's eyes and asked, "Can I name it?"
Yes, you may, hero. The thing is female.
Cass tenderly placed a hand on the Lamia's face and ever so softly declared, "Chisei," in honor of the new friend she longed to see once more. Many weeks of training and traveling had gone by when Casterlyn suddenly posed a question that had been heavily weighing on her mind for quite some time. Chisei is great at gathering food for us, and we sleep a lot to save energy. But what about potions? Wouldn't those be more beneficial to my training than constant resting? Casterlyn had been grinding through forests and fields of monsters for days and days now. She'd become much more receptive to the idea of destroying the evils of the land in order to protect her princess as of late. Fierna took it as a sign of acceptance. In her mind, Casterlyn was finally at peace with being here with her, but in truth, Cass' determination never strayed. Her eagerness to fight, she thought, would bring her ever closer to seeing her beloved family again. And with every swing of her broadsword, she felt a growing strength inside her she'd never felt before.
So tell me then, what exactly do these concoctions look like in your video games, my hero?
Fee waved Chisei away as the Lamia dropped fresh meat from its mouth. "Well," Cass began as she invoked a fire spell for roasting, "they're like, I don't know, energy drinks? Here, look, I'll draw one for you." She grabbed a stick and drew a generic little bottle in the sand by the fire.
Ah, you mean medicinal herbs and tonics. We do indeed have such things in this world.
Where do you buy them? Who provides them to you when there's no one around anymore? Cass knew speaking of the plague was a sensitive subject, but she had a legitimate reason to mention it. And a part of her had hoped Princess Fierna would open up about her past a bit more.
We shall come across them when the time is right. Until then, tell me more about your games.
Cass described non-player characters and menu screens, character customization, and weapon shops for the duration of their meal. These were the aspects of gaming that she'd always found boring and mundane, Cass told Fierna. But Fee sat quietly and absorbed every detail of the conversation until their meal was finished, and it was time to journey forth once more. 3 days into their travels, they'd reached a freezing tundra, and just when Cass was sure she'd die of frostbite, a stall appeared up ahead to the left of the path Cass was currently sliding across. Fee, who'd warped ahead in an effort to find shelter, came back in a breathless flurry.
"There's a waresman up ahead."
"A what?"
"A man who peddles wares, you silly woman. He may have equipment to keep us warm, tonics to raise our vitality. Grab my hand."
Cass did as she was told and warped several miles forward within the blink of an eye. She suddenly found herself at the stall she'd seen in the distance, and standing in the center was the waresman the princess had so excitedly mentioned. But to Cass' horror, the old man's eyes and mouth were threaded through and sewn shut. Though the wind was fierce, the man's long white beard did not sway. "Is he okay, Princess Fiona?" It was as if he were made of stone, but as soon as Casterlin spoke, the man jerked his head toward the sound and desperately clawed at his mouth. He needed to speak with her. He needed help. He whimpered and whined and reached over the counter, but Fiona smacked the old sage's hand away. When she touched him, his religious cloak tore. His muscles swelled to an incredibly large size, and his face morphed into that of a demon's. His skin was bright red, and 4 horns protruded from his forehead. He must be a boss, huh?
Yes, of course. Destroy him, my brave Casterlin."
And with that, Cass called forth Chisei and recited a spell to bring forth pieces of frozen earth. They hit the demonic creature like bullets, and so it went until he was so riddled with holes. He hit the earth with such force, the ground split beneath them, and they were sent careening down into a chasm of darkness. Below were spikes of ice crystals, and there was surely no way to survive. Chisei was slumbering inside the broadsword where she had spent much of her time since Casterlin had mastered the art of summoning her. Fiona was too far from Cass to grab hold of her, and was depleted from warping with her earlier. She had just enough magical resilience to cast a spell onto her shoes so that she could jump onto the ledge with ease. Meanwhile, miles and miles below, Cass' fall had been broken by the demon now turned human again. She used a shard of ice to cut his lips and eyes free. To her horror, the old sage started coughing up blood, but even so, he looked at her with intensity, muttered "Save me," and grabbed her hand. In this trance, she could see the old sage working in the castle. He blessed newborn infants with holy water, sang hymns, and obviously delighted in giving his life's purpose to please the gods of Odensai. He had lived a happy life. Scene shift. He had been turned into an ice goblin and was now living his days in the tundra, safely enough and far from harm. Scene shift. A shadow loomed over him, a forceful, unexpected transformation back into his human form. His eyes and mouth were sewn through with enchanted thread, so tightly, so painfully, that he could not scream for salvation. When the trance was broken, Cass felt herself being lifted up, but she was screaming and crying and fighting too much to care who had hold of her.
Such belligerent behavior, such intolerable insolence.
Cass felt a blunt force hit the base of her skull and went out like a light. In her dreams, she watched Harumi play in the front yard, but suddenly the little girl started getting farther and farther away. Casterlin yelled after her, but each time the child turned, her face aged. By the time Casterlin's throat had become so raw she couldn't scream anymore, the child turned to her with the face of an ancient old hag and asked over and over with a low and terrifying voice, "Why did you leave me, Mommy? Why did you leave me?" "I didn't leave. I didn't." Cass jolted upright, gasping for breath. When she looked around, she realized she was lying in a bed of yellow flowers near a lake. The sun was warm against her skin, and she felt calm at the sight of Princess Fiona coming toward her. The princess stopped at Cass' feet and dropped 2 armfuls of red and blue potion bottles before her. "What are these, Princess?"
"Potions, my hero. You'll need them now that you've reached level 25.
"Wait, I was 23 before. When did I—"
"You bested an angelic slime and ranked up twice in one go. But you were so tired you collapsed right where you are. Are you aware that you snore, my lady?"
Casterlin sat up and examined the bottles carefully. She never thought to ask Fiona if such items existed in the world of Onsai, but she felt relieved to see them. Meanwhile, Princess Fiona had a wicked grin, knowing she'd reset Cast yet again. Just like the video games the stupid woman went on and on about, and she would continue to do so, tormenting Casterlin Akahoshi and wiping her memories over and over and over, knowing full well Cast was her clueless little puppet, knowing full well that Cast's mind would eventually break. You've bested many fiends, but now is the time to test your mettle. We are going dungeon diving today. Dungeon diving sounded delightfully dangerous, and Cast perked right up at the mere mention of it. No potions needed. When we get there, you will need to focus all of your will into fire magic. I am unsure if there are torches therein. Cass glanced down at her little majesty. What? You expected royalty to venture into such a loathsome, filthy place? This translated to, I have no idea what's down there, but I'm too prideful to admit it. Casterlin was fine with exploring a deep, dark mystery dungeon and a little proud of herself for being able to understand Fiona's communication style after such a long time together. Finally, I'm making progress. I'll get through to her soon. Maybe I'll adopt her when I get home. I just have to convince her to come with me. She lost herself in thought, and by the time she'd finally decided to look up, they'd already reached their destination. The abyss-like hole before them was nothing special to look at, but the aura emanating from it left Cast feeling hopeless and frightened. She knew these were not her emotions, though, and stepped forward to assess the entrance. Dungeon diving, to Cast's detriment, was exactly as it sounded. In most video games and TV shows, the hero or heroine always waltzed right up to a dungeon entrance and walked straight on in. Sure, they may have had to find a key or solved a few puzzles to unlock the entrance, but never had Cast seen anything like what she was being forced to do. Telling Princess Fiona that she was afraid of heights only made Fee frustrated enough to sweep Casterlin's legs out from underneath her, forcing her to fall headfirst into the entrance. Needless to say, it was a long way down, and Cass felt like she were falling endlessly into the pits of hell. She landed so hard that both of her legs shattered beneath her own weight. She screamed out in agony. Her pain echoed across the cavernous walls. When Fiona gingerly landed beside her as if she'd glided in on a spring breeze, she scoffed cruelly at the adventurer's predicament. "Help me, it hurts." "Help yourself. I know you're capable of healing yourself." But she wasn't. They both knew she'd never been taught such magic. Even still, she tried her hardest to concentrate on healing magic that moved like a green vine that curled up and around her shattered legs to mend and ease. She opened her eyes. Through tears and labored breathing, she realized it hadn't worked. Meanwhile, Fiona stood tauntingly in front of her, guzzling down a healing tonic out of sheer spite. Cast reached like a beggar for the bottle in Fee's hand, but the pain was so intense she passed out on the spot. When she awoke, she noticed her name and HP bar full and fixed just above her head. Of course, the skill names floating inside her head right now, the HP bar just above, these were a natural part of her and had been since the moment she'd arrived in the Kingdom of Crown. Stepping inside the dungeon was like walking straight into a horror movie. She remembered jumping into a gaping hole in the ground and waking up hundreds of feet below the earth. The dungeon had 4 pathways. But the middle path felt right, so with a strange sense that she'd done so before, Cast used her eyes to light the way. Her hands were shaking as if something terrible had already happened, but she refused to show fear in front of the princess she'd sworn to protect. "Open inventory," she called into the nothingness. A menu manifested before her, full of food, potions, and bombs. Nice, she thought to herself. These would definitely come in handy at some point. She felt it in her aching bones. Open, equips. This time a weapon menu appeared. From here, she was able to swipe left or right to reveal one item at a time inside a clear square with 2 yellow arrows on either side for scrolling. She chose the broadsword at first. "Come forth, my loyal summon Chisei." And from the sword, the snake-like woman arose. "Open, equips." This time, she placed the sword back inside the menu and scrolled over to the wand. It was a collection of wooden branches woven together with a perfectly round jade sphere at the top. Projectile attacks would suit her combat style best for this mission, and using an instrument to channel and amplify her magical energies seemed only proper when facing off against who knows what at the end of the long and daunting tunnel stretched out before her. She was so excited she didn't even wait for Fiona to catch up. Or at least that's what she convinced herself to believe. But in truth, she was afraid of Fiona's touch. Her reflex was to flinch even at the sound of the princess's slippers catching up behind her. Fee paid no mind and simply warped herself further into the cavern until she was practically breathing down Cass's neck. She clutched Cass's tunic and feigned being frightened just to watch a shiver go through Cass's spine. She wasn't expecting a loud, ghostly groan to make her own spine tingle. They both jumped at the noise, stared at each other with quizzical eyes, and then proceeded onward. Whatever was making the sound surely couldn't be as frightening as Princess Fiona herself, right? Wrong. Enter triple question mark. A grotesque, rotting man stood backed against the wall. His HP was at 100%. He raised his arms into a defensive X formation, the way a professional knife thrower might present their blades for a flashy circus show. The man's flesh was inside out. She'd never seen a creature quite so indescribably terrifying in those horror movies she loved so much back on Earth. Still, without knowing why, Casterlin felt an increasingly strong urge to make contact with him. He was incredibly hard to look at. The only human feature about him were the small, perfectly round and rimless spectacles adorning the bridge of what was once his nose. The word zombie sprang to mind, and even then, Cass felt a twinge of guilt for calling him as such. The urge was so strong, the fear was too great. "Don't just stand there, you witless moron! Something flew past them. A small trace of blood ran down Casterlin's cheek. Something sharp had grazed her, but she wasn't hurt. Fierna, on the other hand, let out an indignant shriek. Cass turned to see a syringe sticking out of Fiona's chest. The girl collapsed. Cass had no time to panic. The zombie had closed the gap between them and grabbed her wrist, causing the wand to clatter to the ground. He pulled her hand toward his chest and held it there so that Cass could feel his beating heart. Her eyes went blank and she fell into his memories, as she had several times before. "Redrick." "Yes, Your Highness. Emergency delivery, no time." The blonde woman was pulling a very pregnant patient in behind her on a rolling white and silver bed that just barely fit through the doorway. The panic queen gave the two servants that had helped her roll the bed in permission to stand aside and watch if they remained quiet and behaved themselves. They were nervous but stayed silent as Redrick approached the sultana of a foreign nation to help deliver her precious heirs. He was a studious young gentleman with platinum blonde hair, streaked with silver here and there for all the stressful work he'd been doing as of late, but nothing about him was more striking than his brilliant silver eyes. Sweat beaded his brow as he worked. He pulled his spectacles off and commanded the woman far above his station to push like her life depended on it. The firstborn was handed to the female servant. The second was handed to the male servant. The blonde woman stood by, ready to take the third and final child into her arms. But just then a gale of pure dark magic blasted into the room. The third child had crowned and was almost completely out now. If Redrick had been just a bit faster, everything might have been all right. At least that's what he would think punishingly to himself over and over when all was said and done. The gale of darkness drilled right through the foreign queen's stomach. She stopped moving entirely. Unable to give the final push needed, Redrick managed to grab the third infant out of harm's way just in time, or so he thought. "Ronnie, my sultana!" the male servant yelled out as Ronnie's entire body turned coal black, and she let out a painful gasp before dying. The female servant screamed and cried. She'd tried to run to her dear Ronnie's side, but the blonde woman yanked her back into a warm embrace. "Don't touch her. This is powerful magic. You mustn't touch her lest you carry the same fate. Redrick, are you hurt?" The royal physician Redrick Colsair, the man who'd taken a vow to save human lives until his end, turned to warn the blonde woman with tears in his eyes. "The magic, it's coming back. Run, my lady." "Not without you." The stubborn royal yanked Redrick and the two servants out the door with her and closed off the hospital wing as quickly as she could. The group crumpled in front of the giant iron doors. Once they'd finally caught their breath, the blonde woman managed to ask about the babies. The two servants held their swaddled bundles tightly. The first and second were sleeping ever so soundly. Redrick's face was frozen in horror as he looked down upon the coal-black newborn and the coal-black magic spreading rapidly through his own body. There was no saving the third infant, but the blonde woman still wanted to stop the spread from killing her friend. She reached toward Redrick and touched his arm ever so gently. "Don't touch me! You'll be cursed too, you fool!" The blonde woman came to her senses. He was right. She hadn't been thinking clearly. This disease, whatever it was, wherever it came from, was highly contagious. In the midst of the sudden hush that fell over everyone in the ward, the female servant stood up and motioned for her comrade to do the same. In her native tongue, she told him to return the living children to her homeland. In a language understood by Redrick and the blonde woman, she stated, "Ronnie loved you like a sister. She would not want war between our peoples, but once our sultan learns of her death, there will surely be one. He cannot be talked to, he cannot be reasoned with. Before he travels, erase Arev's memory so that when he presents the children to Sultan Ranveer, no rage will be aimed toward the Kingdom of Crown. No blood will be shed. Keep what happened here between you. I will go to my sultana." Arev grabbed the young handmaiden's wrist and whispered, "Zahira, do not do this." She shook her head and released his grip. She flung the iron doors wide open and ran inside. Arev slammed them shut behind her. Zahira ran to Ronnie's bedside and gripped her hand tightly. The black magic crept onto her caramel-brown skin. The gale of darkness bounced from wall to wall. Finally, it boomeranged toward her. "I shall serve no other." Glass exploded from every window in the room. Zahira's sacrifice had not quite quelled the magic. "Stay here," the blonde woman shouted at the men. Redrick sat in shock. Arev stood in despair. The triplets turned twins began to cry for the warmth of their mother's embrace. They would never know it. Meanwhile, the blonde woman was absolutely determined to chase down the darkness that had escaped the hospital wing and eradicate it once and for all. She ran halfway across the castle, miraculously keeping pace with the gale, until she found herself in 3-year-old Fiona's royal bedchamber. The gale was headed right for the little princess, but before the blonde woman could try and stop it, Fiona had gone and swallowed it up like a bowl of spaghetti. Then she looked up at her mother, who'd just reached the room's entrance, wiped her mouth as if she'd just eaten a delicious meal, and smiled innocently before reaching her hands out in a motion that meant she wished to be picked up by her mother. The blonde woman immediately fainted from the shock. When Casterlin became self-aware once more, she jumped back out of the way of the zombie's reach. Fiona groaned and pulled the syringe full of sedative out from her chest and quickly rose to her feet. Upon seeing the princess, he thrust his arms into that defensive X formation yet again. His long nails receded into his skin to show dripping needles in their place. Then appeared a new name to replace the 3 question marks previously shown. Redrick the Lost. He dodged Casterlin in favor of his true target, Fiona. The needles shot from his fingertips like the quills of a porcupine. Fiona flitted and teleported around the room at Mach speed. "Kill him already," she yelled. But Cast had seen him in his human form. She had also seen Fiona from the blonde woman's perspective and was left feeling conflicted, confused, and disturbed. Redrick had knocked Fiona unconscious. He could have killed her right then and there, but he didn't. He instead chose to show Casterlin something she wasn't meant to see, but absolutely needed to see. And now that Cast was out of Fiona's reach, Redrick was aiming for the kill. The needles protruding from his fingertips were dripping with poison. "Casterlin Akahoshi, I order you by royal decree to kill this wretched abomination!" "But princess..." "Do it now!" Fiona's command was so loud it made Casterlin's ears ring. She couldn't think straight. She couldn't focus. Unable to seize her wand before it was ground to dust under Redrick's rotting bare foot, she rushed to open her equips menu to draw out her favorite instead. She gripped her broadsword tightly and moved toward Redrick with trembling hands. With the hilt of her sword, she hit him right between the eyes and pinned him down as he crumpled to the ground. "I'm sorry, Redrick. I must obey the orders of my lady." Redrick's eyes grew wide with a disturbing realization. Casterlin raised her head and screamed as the blade went down. Clink. Cast had closed her eyes just before impact. She couldn't bear to see what she had to do. But upon opening them, she saw that her blade had missed entirely and that she'd swung toward the dungeon's ground. "I'm losing my patience," roared Fiona. "I'm so sorry, Redrick." Shaking hands raised the sword high once more, but she hesitated for a moment too long. Redrick had grabbed the blade barehanded and plunged it deep into his very own heart. His HP bar drained to 0, and Redrick the Lost, who had once proudly donned the title of Redrick the Royal Physician, was no more. Horrible rumors and disturbing speculations flooded the media, sensationalizing Cass and now Chisei's missing persons case, officially dubbed the Bermuda Triangle case, and eventually decaying into the BT cold case when all possible leads and explanations had died away and were eventually dropped. Chisei had been branded a criminal and painted as a brutal villainess by wayward reporters, but alas, the hopeful idol was cleared of any involvement further than polite conversation with the woman she'd shared her seat with the day after she'd met her tragic fate on that cold and lonely hospital rooftop. The flight attendant had produced the time-stamped and dated ticket. Chisei's therapist had provided sealed, no longer confidential documents regarding her sessions. Many witnesses came forward to solidify the truth. Both women had boarded the plane with innocent and well-meaning intent. Haru knew this for a fact, not blind faith. Casterlin had wanted to reconcile her mother's relationship since the day she'd given birth. Looking into her newborn's eyes and then to Haru's, she'd said to him, "A miracle like this should be shared with the person you look up to the most, shouldn't it?" Being unable to bear seeing her cry like that, he'd called his mother-in-law and gave her no chance to protest. He'd turned his camera to front-facing mode and zoomed in on Harumi's angelic face before Catelyn could even get annoyed. Her heart melted in an instant, but she was stubborn and set in her ways and kept her interactions with them all to the bare minimum. A few calls throughout the holiday season, an exchange of photos through Haru's email, with Cass being too hard-headed to speak nor share her own. No, there was no ulterior motive here as far as Haru could see, but there was, he concluded, foul play of some kind or another. He felt it deep in his subconscious, a creeping suspicion that something sinister existed somewhere out there, and that it had wanted all of the light Casterlin's heart could offer. When he'd reached out to the police, family, friends, they'd all suggested therapy to ease the burden of stress this whole situation had caused him. But Catelyn sensed it too. "You're not crazy. I'm not crazy. Someone took my daughter from me, and that's all there is to it." But when pressed about the feeling they both sensed, both Haru and Cat would shut down. They were equal parts unable to describe the sensation, the energy they felt when investigators allowed them to board the plane and examine Cat's seat for an overly exaggerated cold case television series. No one else seemed to experience the enveloping darkness, the tingling sparks of electricity, the hair standing on the back of their necks. But when Cat touched the mirror in the lavatory, when Haru brushed his fingertips across the armrest of the seat, they felt it simultaneously. A force this world would never acknowledge, with its supreme logic and higher intelligence in all things spiritual and scientific. The two would never know that what they felt were malicious traces of magic. Vierna's darkness seeped into the places she'd been viewing Cast from. A cracked and blood-stained mirror in the run-down castle showed Casterlin applying lipstick. A camera from a nearby cell phone gave Fee a glimpse at the hand she'd soon hold. Her desire seeped into the mirror. Her frustration and impatience crackled through the armrests of the plane. But Casterlin never knew she'd been watched like this, nor had anyone. Technology of the mundane world had dulled the human senses so completely that even the most highly sensitive individuals would be hard-pressed to pick up on them. Every passenger on that flight, and every investigator thereafter, had felt this immense power, but felt compelled to keep it to themselves. The internet was, of course, a blazing trash heap of hatred and disdain for the suspect, the mourners, and most especially the missing. Comments like "maybe she fell out" and "good riddance" flooded the darkest corners of the web. Some of the theory threads were so graphic that Haru had decided to drop television and internet entirely for a while. With no virtual distractions, he was able to put much greater effort into the time he spent with Harumi. There was bittersweet irony in the growing bond between Haru and Catelyn. Cat initially hated the very idea of him, but seeing Haru's determination to find Cast was proof enough that he hadn't meant to steal her away, that he had sincerely wanted a family. He was, to her surprise, a wonderful father, nothing like Cast's father, who'd walked out of her life the moment he'd learned Cat was expecting. No, he was destroying all of her preconceived notions and making her regret her decision to estrange herself. But nothing can make the hands of time turn back, and regretting the past did nothing in the search for answers as to Casterlin's untimely disappearance. Kat and Haru had never seen eye to eye, but had wanted the same thing all along, to keep Casterlin safe, and through the years, they would lean on one another in their deepest depressions, all the while trying to keep Harumi's unraveling hope alive and well. They took significant pride in their candlelight vigils, a guiding beacon of hope that Casterlin would never get to see. Those warm and quiet vigils that Haru and Kat so carefully and proudly planned were always held in the darkest hours of the night every year, not on the date of Casterlin's disappearance, but on Harumi's birthday. What she knew was meant to be a loving celebration of remembrance secretly made her heart break further and her bitterness grow with each passing year. Her birth would forever be overshadowed by her mother's loss. That was a special kind of cruelty that she kept deep inside. She hadn't wanted gifts, nor prayers, nor candles for her mother held by well-meaning strangers. She'd wanted to see her father smile like he used to. She'd wanted to see Grandma Catlin beat her illness. She'd simply wanted her mother. Upon Redrick's demise, Casterlin's forlorn demeanor had deemed her worthy of keeping that painful memory. Princess Fierna wanted her to carry that image in her mind and relish in the knowing that it made her suffer greatly. These beasts, Casterlin was growing a soft spot for them. Princess Fierna noted a peculiar eagerness in Cast when she learned their next foray would be far across the borderlands and into what was once a neighboring desert kingdom, long since conquered and enveloped into Fierna's ominous empire. She bade her champion to grind on lesser monsters for item restock and to pack heavily for the long, sweltering journey. Her item roulette, as she dubbed it, was eventually filled to the brim with HP, MP, holy water, pure sight, and a wide array of other assorted bottled concoctions. All manner of slimes dropped these items like crazy. Though she'd sworn this was a new feature, Casterlin held her silence and found herself excited for the journey ahead in spite of Redrick's shocking end. She was hoping beyond hope that this conquered kingdom had once belonged to Rani, the woman in her vision, and that she could learn more about the blonde woman and Princess Fierna by traveling there. She threw caution to the wind whilst they were traveling on foot, and was just about to bluntly ask Fierna for more details of her childhood when she became blindsided by the most beautiful oasis she'd ever seen. The pair were days and days into their quest. Hours earlier, Casterlin had made a gruesome discovery when begging her ladyship for even just the slightest sip of water. "Are the grubs and sandworms of the desert so graciously provided not enough for you?" She'd been freely creating pure, crystal-clear drinking water for the both of them up until their trek through the desert began, then suddenly cut Casterlin off from any magical aid. Cast was hurt and couldn't understand why, but she remained a loyal knight regardless. "I want water, my lady. Why do you not conjure water for us? Why? Please." "This is your training, champion. Don't forget, you have magic in you as well." Fierna scoffed. Cass tried to release the water element from both hands over and over, but failed each and every time. With each frustrated attempt, her forehead began to ache and burn. She hesitantly brushed her fingertips across her forehead. Her fears were confirmed when she felt the searing ridges and symbols etched into her skin. She'd been branded. She'd spent the day in shock until now. She was weak from the heat, but her throat was unbearably dry, and her need for water was far too great to worry about the aches and pains racking her arms and legs as she ran. Fierna warped to catch up, screaming demands to stop, but the very second she'd managed to step in front of Casterlin, she heard a click and a violent rumbling erupted beneath their feet. They both hit the ground hard. Hope died away as the oasis faded from vision. In its place, a fleeting speck of silver, a rapid flash of gold. Cass's eyes shot up to see two incredible-looking beings floating into the air high above them. Their bodies, though humanoid, were luminescent, and their heads, symbolized by a silver crescent moon and the golden sun respectively, revolved round and round. The sun's head moved in a constant clockwise state, while the moon's turned counterclockwise, both in perfect sync with one another.
Mirage, mirage upon the sand, whose soul is it soon to be damned? It's you!
The moon-faced entity shrieked at the sight of Casterlin. Her very existence made the creature's blood boil in its veins. The voice emanating from it was wholly female, and may have once even been considered kind, but now it was engulfed beneath a demonic layer that growled along with every word she spoke. She was the embodiment of the Moon Tarot card. Her very being emanated secrecy, illusions, and the chaotic darkness of a woefully broken heart. The bar above her head showed the title, Linear. Her body was cloaked in a sea of glittering silver stars, perfectly color-matched from head to toe. The sun, in all his golden radiance, stood masculine and proud in the air, but spoke no words. His eyes, tinged with sadness, were glued to Casterlyon's. Just like the moon, Linear had always paled in comparison to Lenore's beloved majesty. Ever and always, no matter what twisted form he was forced to take, he would only have eyes for her. Seeing Casterlyn standing there in the vast desert stirred something within the sun, but he'd been enslaved to the moon for what seemed like an eternity now, and so his memories and his human emotions were distant, muddled, and painfully confusing. So painful that his head felt like it would burst open any second. He tried to place 2 hands on either side of his head, but it was constantly spinning. His world was always spinning, always revolving around Linear ever since the plague had come. Lenore was hanging on to his humanity by a thread, just as the goblins seemed to do, just as Redrick had done.
Child of man, you should run while you can, for I will show no mercy.
Linear bellowed down to Casterlyn. She didn't seem to care that Fierna was there at all, or perhaps she hadn't even realized she was there due to being so enthralled with Casterlyn's presence. Where such malice came from, Cast had not the slightest idea, but a fight was a fight, and she was more than ready to take these 2 on. She called forth the bombs from her item roulette and started slinging them wildly up into the air. She hadn't managed to land a single hit, but she had inadvertently kicked up a sand screen in which to hide in.
Foolish woman, but you always have been. Coveting thy beloved is a grave and sad sin. You shall be punished, you shall be flayed. You'll regret having come here, you'll lament having stayed.
The moon blasted starlight from her hands. So luminous was this magic power that it temporarily blinded the princess and her champion. Choking on dust and stepping blindly, it was inevitable that Fierna lost sight of Cast. In separation, Cast blindly grasped at the air around her, thinking she might manage to find Fie this way. Just as she was about to give up and wait for the blindness to clear, she bumped into something. The sun's blazing visage cut through her vision, a blurry beacon out of the sandstorm. She could faintly tell that he was knelt down on both knees, head in hand, suffering. Her kindly instinct to reach out and grab his shoulder caused a seismic wave of magic to blast through everything. The sandstorm instantly died down into absolute stillness, and for a brief moment there was silence so deafening you could hear a pin drop miles out anywhere upon the vast landscape. And then, anguished, ear-splitting screaming. Wave after seismic wave flooded through Casterlyn's body. She was amazed at how strong she'd grown, so much so that she was still standing in spite of the sun's tantrum. His wailing caused such a disturbance that the earth gave way just as it had earlier, but this time, incredibly large gold and silver tarot cards emerged from beneath the ground. Not being native to the minerals and crafting materials of Odensai made it unclear what they were made from exactly. They appeared to be magically infused forms of thick metal and stone. Had her life not been in peril, Cast would have surely stopped to marvel at these beautiful cards. But alas, she hadn't been spirited away to Odensai to sightsee. Each card rose into the sky, then stopped after forming 2 perfectly aligned rows. The bottom row, all silver cards engraved with a crescent insignia, represented the minor arcana. The top row, all golden cards engraved with the sun insignia, represented the major arcana. Casterlyn knew each card by heart. Tarot card readings were a bit of a secret hobby for her when she was a teenager. She'd been coerced into getting a romance reading by a group of high school friends that dabbled in taboo books on how to be an everyday modern witch in a society that shuns us. They were the school misfits, and so they found all things occult, rebellious, and beyond the realm of societal norms to be deeply satisfying. Cass had always been an easygoing, quiet person, and so she didn't mind being accepted into this group, nor any other. She was always polite in every social circle she found herself in. She was raised by her mother Catelyn to keep an open mind for all things, be they spiritual or material, and so she went to a quaint little back alley magic shop called Star Night Connection, filled to the brim with crystals and incense. It was an odd experience, but she remembered loving the way the store smelled of well-read books and rose-scented candles. She also remembered enjoying her reading very much and thanking the elderly card reader multiple times before leaving. Her session had turned out to be incredibly accurate. Looking back on it now, Cass noted the warning of a tower moment long after her happily ever after. The cards had all been foretelling of a harmonious romantic relationship that would lead to collaborative success in her career as well. When a very pregnant Empress showed up as the second-to-last card, Cass's friends giggled and fussed about her future. Every card held true from her happiness with Haru to the birth of her beloved Harumi. But the final card pulled from the bottom of the deck was the Tower. Novice or not, anyone could tell by looking at the symbols on this card that it spelled misfortune. The elderly woman's advice was simply to rise above said burning tower and fight through it as hard as she could. Of course, she and her girlfriends had all assumed it would be something akin to a breakup and makeup type ordeal, but Casterlyn found herself living in that tower moment here and now. Never in her wildest dreams could she have foreseen a future where she'd be ripped from her perfect life and thrown into such incredible strife. But she'd also been playing out the Madame Tarot reader's sound advice. She'd fight and keep on fighting through all the discord until she'd find herself back in her husband's arms. Once the cards were fully aligned, one mysteriously mixed card made up of swirling patterns, both silver and gold, rose even higher above the two rows and turned itself to face forward. The sun and the moon vanished within the card, and when it dispersed into an array of blinding starlight, the major arcana began to turn. Once that row had done a full about-face, the minor arcana followed suit. Each card flashed to reveal its respective title. The Hanged Man stepped out from inside his card, lassoed Casterlyn by the neck, and pulled her in with him. Agile, graceful, a true acrobatic talent he was. Unfortunately for Cass, she was unable to appreciate this Piscean marvel, being that he was too busy trying to strangle her to death as he jumped and flipped in dazzling, graceful sweeps from wooden platform to wooden platform. Casterlyn's first instinct was to call forth Chisei from her broadsword, but alas, she could not reach it in her current state. The setting within the card was an ancient forest filled with tall and massive trees as far as the eye could see. Etched into these trees were adornments created specifically for the hangman to enjoy. In his natural habitat, he was able to glide freely, and to cast torment, he did just that. He swung her round like a rag doll, reveling in seeing her face turn from rosy red to a sickly pale blue. Just as she was about to lose consciousness and concede with her untimely fate, an idea crossed her mind. Chisei couldn't be summoned, sure, but that didn't mean Casterlyn couldn't copy her greatest attribute. She focused her thoughts into visualizing the sharp fangs of her beloved feathered lamia at first, and then channeled the source of her powers from the elements available to her. Yes, she was surrounded by earth, wood, wind, and grass, but none of those would be powerful enough for the task at hand. It was a gamble to call upon the elements of the card itself, but she had nothing to lose but her life either way. She envisioned the slab of gold, the sun insignia that had awed her only moments ago, and as she did so, she could feel her teeth transmuting, sharpening into perfectly filed golden fangs akin to Chisei's shark-like assets. Said assets were invaluable to their hunting and food supply. At least they had been until Fiona cruelly decided to cut them off from their magic and food sources. No matter, Casterlyn found herself thinking as she chomped down hard at the rope. Being starved by my lady is still less cruel an end than to be strangled to death. Once freed from her captivity, she grabbed the gnawed rope and wound it around her waist so that her captor could harm her no more. It was only when she'd managed to parry an expertly thrown kick from her assailant that she'd noticed the hangman's hands were tightly bound behind his back. He'd definitely used his hands to tie the rope around her neck earlier and pull as mercilessly as he could until she was one breath away from oblivion. That being the case, Cass deduced that every failed attempt to hang her resulted in his prior imprisonment upon the cross buried directly in the middle of the forest. Though the trees seemed to stretch on to the ends of eternity, the cross appeared no matter how far nor how deeply they ran through them. What a strange and sad purgatory to live within these cards, Cass muttered to herself as she blocked a barrage of violent kicks.
Truly a living hell,
the hangman said in response. Taken aback by his ability to speak, the hangman took the opportunity to kick her square in the stomach. She coughed up blood.
Winded, bruised, and bleeding, yet you still smile?
He asked with a quizzical tilt of his head.
You remind me of myself when I was once court jester, personally appointed to a small and devastating demon princess.
You mean Fiona? Cass said in an attempt to keep him talking while she grappled for her sword. As the hangman turned and bared his back to reveal his bloody scars, Cass used his distraction to finally call Chisei forward. As she materialized from within the broadsword, the hangman hurriedly pulled his shirt back down and flipped backwards using the sheer velocity of the wind to propel him as far away from the now doubled forces as he could. Cass nodded in command, and Chisei flew after him with the utmost obedience. Cass took this time to breathe in deeply. Her vision was muddled by the onset of a migraine caused by lack of oxygen for an extended amount of time. Her dehydrated, severely weakened body made her feel almost useless in this fight. Should she not be far stronger by now? She'd lost track of her current level, grinding so often without any breaks in between that she'd gone into a form of autopilot berserker mode. She'd hacked and slashed away until Princess Fiona deemed it appropriate for her to stop. So then, why had she become so weak? The answer was clear. Though Casterlin was near as obedient now to Her Highness as Chisei was to her, sheer denial kept her from understanding that Fiona had let her become this weak. And that blind faith and denial was exactly what kept Cass going, the hope that at some point this would all be over and the reward for her valor and staunch bravery would be a return to normalcy, a return to the life and loved ones whose importance far outweighed any loyalty she may have had for the princess, though she dare not let it show. Casterlin was in the middle of visualizing her next magic stunt when Chisei came roaring back toward her with the hangman beaten to a pulp and wrapped safely in his original position, hanging upside down, tied securely to his accursed cross. He was barely alive, but Cass praised Chisei for her hard work regardless. She figured being stuck in a forever forest all alone and strewn up in such an undignified manner was punishment enough for this crazed court jester. Out like a light and no longer a threat, Chisei bade Cass to climb atop her back in order to reach the exit faster. Upon jumping out from the card, it blackened and fell from the sky with an enormous boom. Yet again, this kicked up an unexpected sandstorm that flung Cass from Chisei's back, sending both of them flying directly into yet another card. The atmosphere here was that of a Gothic graveyard. In the midst of the tombs knelt a black-haired, porcelain-skinned woman adorned in a long-sleeve white lace gown, wielding 2 blades across her chest. A rather dangerous stance to have for a woman wearing a blindfold, Cass said aloud. And just as she predicted, the woman's entire body tensed in response to the sound of her voice. She almost felt pity at how easily she'd be able to take this card down, as the title Maiden of 2 Swords appeared, glowing eerily in the nighttime fog. Being that the 2 of Swords usually represented a mental stalemate and an inability to move, Cass couldn't help but believe her challenger would be entirely unable to fight back at all. I'll be gentle. I promise not to bruise you too badly. Casterlin sincerely disliked the idea of hurting an immobile target, but she also sincerely disliked being trapped. The frightening howls echoing in the distance only served to fortify her resolve even further. She wanted to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible. The sky turned red as blood. Blackened, decaying hands reached from the earth beneath their unmarked headstones. The howling ceased, and the sword maiden slowly stood from her place among the dead. Oh shit. Cass' knees began to knock as the maiden took a few steps toward her. When she was within hearing range, the woman spoke. You go to I. To even the odds, the Maiden of 2 Swords smacked her weapons together as hard as she possibly could, whilst Cass was focused on reading her lips. The ringing that reverberated from them was unbearably painful, so deafening it caused Cass' ears to bleed. She'd warned Cass that she was going to die by her hand. The blind attacker was well versed in her skill to feel the vibrations of her opponent, but Cass was still able to see clearly, so she assumed the next onslaught would be direct and to the stomach. She blocked her torso off in a protective stance. On. She desperately tried to read her attacker's lips again. She understood, but a split second too late. The maiden had warned her. She'd mouthed the word wrong, and menacingly tilted her head upward. Cass, now thoroughly deafened, felt a force pulverize her body from above. Blades of wind swept her high into a ferocious, unforgiving twister. Air. She'd forgotten the element of the sword in tarot was associated with the element of air. The pressure was so intense that she struggled just to keep her eyes open as the sharp wind magic sliced at her skin. Her clothes were ripped and torn. Her hair was a bedraggled mess. She'd become so thin and frail from Fiona's training that the cards surely all underestimated her ability to fight back and win. How could she stop the treacherous tornado? How does one possibly slice through thin air? She ran at the sword maiden full force. The ensuing sword fight was graceful and elegant, like a deadly dance of ballet. The second a bead of sweat escaped the maiden's brow, Casterlin took the opportunity to strike. She forced her mind to focus on freezing ice and sent a wave of mental intention toward the maiden. The ice magic spell had caught, freezing that one small bead. The ice began to spread like ivy all across the swordsman's skin, creeping like spindly spider's legs to encapsulate her entire being. The moment the maiden of two swords froze over, Cass bashed her broadsword down upon her head, leaving nothing but crushed ice and shattered shards in her wake. Chise had been pulled into the Ten of Pentacles card. Though she could no longer express human emotions, she felt a strong need to protect Casterlin, mostly from Fierna, whom she was terrified of for reasons she could no longer remember, but also from any that might put Cass' life at risk. Being separated from her master really pissed her off. She missed the comfort of sleeping inside the broadsword where she didn't have to see herself reflected in surfaces. She could ease into dreams of another life in another world. Agitated as she was, it didn't help that she was voraciously hungry as well. The pentacle holder threw pentacles at her like ninja shuriken. She caught the 9 pentacle throwing stars in her mouth, but immediately spat them back at the holder once she realized they were inedible. With 1 of 10 coins remaining, the holder had lost his composure and began to tremble as the winged lamia bared her sharp fangs. Being a greedy, materialistic man, he refused to drop the last big coin. There was no escape as Chise closed in, unhinged jaws open wide as she swooped down upon her prey. Meanwhile, Fierna walked into the card of the round. She sat herself down at a white and black marble table and poured herself a cup of tea. 4 gallant knights surrounded her, raising goblets at her arrival. "And who might you miserable lot be?" The Knight of Wands nearly choked on his wine.
"You do not remember your squadron, your grace? We were assigned to guard you from birth. We may look different, but I assure you we are true knights of crown."
Wands coughed and wheezed through his declaration, yet Fierna sat blank-faced. She was entirely unimpressed. She let the men ramble on and on. Each of the 4 elemental knights tried to curry favor with their new overlord by regaling her with tales from a past they had no idea she despised with a boiling hatred. Upon broaching the painful subject of Fierna's mother, she abruptly held up a hand, drinking one last sip of rose tea with her other, and relayed that the time was passing quickly within the realm of the cards and that she really must be going. The knights of sword, wand, cup, and pentacle all rose from the table, only to kneel humbly before Fierna, each offering their support in their own over-the-top way to help Fee to find her mother, as they seemed to have foolishly forgotten how they'd ended up trapped in an oversized deck of cards in the first place. Time has a way of deteriorating the human mind after all. Magic even more so. Fierna stared down at the men with the sweetest smile. It was as if they were looking up into the eyes of an angel sent from the gods. But Fierna was no angel. She manifested a shadow scythe twice her size and cleanly swept through the men without a second thought. What needless praise! She walked out of the card of round, leaving 4 noble headless knights in her wake. They'd bowed their heads so deeply in the wake of that sweet, sinister smile that they'd never seen it coming. All 3 women released from their cards at the same time, and all turned to watch each one crumble into blackened soot and float away with the desert tide. The 2 of Swords, the 10 of Pentacles, and most surprisingly, all 4 knight cards fell. Casterlin was deeply impressed by her ladyship's ability to fight 4 to 1. Chise was terrified and hid behind her master, placing her long nails upon Casterlin's shoulders for comfort. Chise was barbaric when in combat, but Cast understood her childish behavior in the presence of Fierna. She truly had a way of making everyone in her path feel small. However, this was no time to cower. The death of 6 arcana rippled through the entire tarot deck. Enraged armies emerged from their metal prisons. Fire-wielding archers and self-propelled wands set ablaze by the telepathic rage of the entire troop of cards. Slithering mermaids and mermen wielding heavy two-handed pikes and maces, sword dancers gliding on gales of hot air, shinobi, samurai, and shoguns clad in solid gold armor surrounded the women from all sides. Chisei went straight for the pentacle wielders. Fiona's weapon of choice against the merfolk was a purple wand, identical to the emerald green one that had mysteriously reappeared in Casterlin's inventory after having been ground to dust in the harrowing encounter with Redrick. In spite of Fee's expectation, Casterlin called forth a bow and arrow to fend off the tribe of fire wielders. Using the trick she'd learned with the Two of Swords card, she accumulated the moisture from the wind gales and the merfolk's fins to frost the tips of each arrow with ice. Once everyone became engulfed in the ensuing chaos of war, Cass took the opportunity to climb and jump from card to card in order to sneak into the Ace of Cups. She wasn't sure what she'd find therein, but her intuitive risk turned out to pay off big time. A large silver chalice encrusted with sapphires the color of the ocean was set upon a white Roman-style pedestal, surrounded by peach and gold clouds as far as the eye could see. It was truly reminiscent of Mount Olympus. Being that the keepers of the chalice were off fighting her comrades, Casterling grabbed the drink with both hands and gulped down its questionable contents without a second thought. She'd hoped it was plain water, but she'd never tasted anything quite like this before. Unable to stop herself, she drank to the very last drop. The drink was truly intoxicating. With no time to spare, she made her way through to the Ace of Swords, the Ace of Wands, and finally, the Ace of Pentacles. After drinking from the cup, she'd gotten an immediate adrenaline rush. Alone in the last card of aces, she transmuted the large pentacle into a golden shield and secured it tightly to her right arm. Afterwards, she set about sharpening the Ace of Wands with the Ace of Swords. As a result of her sharpening, the Ace of Swords caught fire. Beautiful, Cass said as she proceeded to tie her fire sword and fire wand together with rope she'd nabbed from her battle with the Hanged Man. She dubbed her new blazing bayonet-type weapon the first and only blazonetta of its kind. Her heart was racing. She couldn't wait to test her new adornments on the pages and wizards that had just emerged from the remaining tarot cards. Whatever the Ace of Cups had been laced with, be it a poisonous hallucinogenic tonic or an overpowered strength booster, was kicking in hard. Cass felt incredibly strong, so much so in fact that her entire body became enveloped in a glowing halo of golden light. More than strong now, she felt absolutely invincible. Hordes of card dwellers were rushing into the fray. As Casterlin emerged, she was met with a flying wand. Her blazonetta was meant to wipe out the army of cups, but in this situation she had no choice but to jump into the nearest card. The wand followed her through, but instantly dropped and went out. Her blazonetta was ripped from her grasp and rendered equally as useless when its flames burned out as well. She'd immediately bent down to retrieve it, but it was suddenly too heavy to lift, in spite of her glowing power. Perhaps she'd landed in a corresponding card from the Wand Arcana, thus canceling out the effectiveness of fire weapons within. She shrugged, having no choice but to assume her hypothesis correct as she ventured deeper into the card. The room was stark white with one granite monument, even larger than the tarot cards themselves, standing tall and proud. Suspended in the very center, it was so far up into the air that Casterlin couldn't possibly reach it the same way she'd been hopping from card to card outside. Most of those entries were mere flukes. She'd hijacked the wind magic from the sword troop to reach the aces, but now she had nothing to utilize for high jumps. Gazing up at the statue, she noticed two striking features. The first were the two ruby-red jewels encrusted in the monument's eyes. The second were the incredible wings protruding from the monument's back. The thing was clearly modeled after a king, as a large crown sat atop the man's long hair. She took inspiration from the wings and envisioned a pair of white angel wings, tinged with a bit of ruby red, appearing on her own back. Unfortunately, her vision hadn't been as precise as she'd liked. Her mind and heart were still swimming from the effects of that delicious mystery concoction she'd enjoyed earlier. The wings painfully grew from her shoulder blades. The bursting of skin was excruciating, but the drink nullified the pain within seconds afterwards. She practiced flying beneath the statue for a while before gaining enough confidence to fly up to it. Once she reached those deep-set ruby eyes, she poured a glass vial of pure sight onto each one. Nothing happened. Well, it was worth a shot. Now what, big guy? Her heart wrenched as soon as she'd said those words. She was reminded of the playful banter she so enjoyed with Haru. He would always respond to her query of, well, now what, big guy, with, you tell me, tough girl. One tear escaped, then two, then three, then four. She had no one to turn to, no one to rescue her, and so she found herself leaning against the statue, wings enfolded around her. She was grateful to the silent spectator for his stoic, non-judgmental gaze. At last, when she'd composed herself, she felt compelled to caress one of the ruby gemstones. She reached out to touch, but a fierce, roaring hot wind blew her back. A large white lion appeared. It was his roar and hot breath that had enough power to move her. The massive beast lunged at her, went straight through her, then disappeared as quickly as it had come. She once again reached a tentative, shaking hand out and touched the stone. She'd never melted into someone's memories through an inanimate object before, but in this world there was a first time for everything. It seemed she constantly had to remind herself of that. Possibly because she was seeing through the eyes of an object, she was able to watch the scenes herein as if she were in a movie theater. She wasn't bound to the blonde woman's body here like her usual glimpses. She was more like an observant apparition. She could glide through people, just as the lion had done to her. She was so delighted by the beauty and grandeur of this movie that she couldn't help but feel like a character in a fairy tale. All around her were beautiful gardens, white cobblestone walkways, women and men in luxurious masks and gowns. A white and gold carriage rolled up onto the path, and Casterlin's ghostly jaw dropped when a small version of the blonde woman emerged from within. She was greeted by a woman in a lovely purple gown, adorned meticulously with shimmering gold jewelry that highlighted her long lilac hair and eyes, and beside her a handsome older gentleman with black and silver hair, decorated like a soldier, held out his hand to help the young child and her parents down. When she stood at full stature, there was no mistaking it was indeed the 5-year-old version of the blonde woman. Casterlin glided with the troop of fabulous people all the way into an extravagant room containing a bejeweled cradle and a darling crying 3-year-old with striking red eyes, pure white hair, and long, lovely white lashes.
He's a bit too big to be sleeping in there. I have a big girl bed. He needs a big boy bed like me. Mother says I'm a big girl all the time. The blonde child stated proudly. The baby's crying was obnoxious, but he reminded her of the baby dolls she'd loved to play with at home, so she decided at that moment that she approved of this little prince and would happily play with him when he stopped crying. A servant knelt and announced loudly, "Queen Amethyst Crown and King Tourmaline Crown, along with all the crownsfolk of our humble kingdom, wish His Highness Prince Carnelian Crown and Her Highness Princess Delia Rosequartz of the Rosequartz dynasty a very happy 3rd and 5th birthday today." "May you both flourish into fine rulers," Amethyst said kindly, clinking glasses with Clara Rosequartz, a kindly woman with silver white eyes and blonde hair tied back into a low bun. Then Tourmaline Crown and Kyanite Rosequartz led them into the throne room where a lively party took place. Graceful dances, fine wines, dozens of exotic cakes from around the world of Odensai. In name only, this was a birthday bash to celebrate the children. Cast found herself more in awe of discovering the blonde woman's true identity at last, Delia Rosequartz. It was amazing to finally know her name, after so much time spent swimming around in her memories. At the end of the birthday ball, Delia and Carnelian were presented by their mothers to all of the high nobles. Carnelian was held proudly on Amethyst's hip. He was so shy at seeing the large audience that he buried his face into Queen Crown's shoulder, all the while sucking his thumb for comfort. Delia was nervous but too brave to show anything less than regality and poise as she climbed the large red velvet steps to stand before the 2 proud fathers bearing gifts. She squeezed her mother's hand as hard as she could the entire time, and luckily enough, her birthday gown was long enough to hide her knocking knees. She glanced back at the crowd, all smiles and cheers at the sweet little royals. She blushed profusely, then whipped her head back round to face her father. Kyanite was a man with kindly ocean eyes and hair to match, slicked back into a spiky high ponytail. His bright blue hair was nothing compared to his shining demeanor.
The dynasty leader was always grinning, always happy. His people openly referred to him as Wild Man, and he loved every second of it. His genuine, loving smile soothed Delia as she chanted a mantra of courage in her mind.
I'm a big girl. I'm a big girl. Mommy says I'm a big girl.
The knights held their hands up, and the gallant, glittering audience fell silent. In honor of your brave future together, in hopes of a harmonious union and the continued fortitude of our esteemed kingdoms, I present the future King and Queen of Crown with these red jewels as a symbol of peace and goodwill. They've been imbued by our very own hands with a spell of prosperity. May the gods smile down upon you always. The crowd repeated the blessing. May the gods smile down upon you always. And with that, the gold and red necklaces were placed gingerly over the children's heads. The guests cheered and whistled, and soon they took their leave. The festivities had concluded on a high note. The royal families couldn't be more proud. When it came time for Clara and Kyanite to return to Rosecourt's castle, Delia finally let slip her brave facade and wept the whole night through. This had been the tradition of all the royal families of Odensai since the dawn of time. The princess chosen in arranged marriage would come to live in the realm of her future betrothed from the age of 5 onward. In the event that the pair were unsuited to one another, negotiations could be made to break the engagement, but this was a rare occurrence, and it certainly didn't happen with Princess Delia and Prince Carnelian. In all their years growing up together, they would never take those matching necklaces off. Cast noted immediately that these were the very jewels within the statue's eyes. She felt a pang in her heart as the scene shifted to a few years later. There stood Carnelian the cursed child Crown, the red-eyed albino and future king of the Kingdom of Crown, elder twin brother to pouty, jealous Guinevere. You are no lion, brother. You are a frightened little lamb, sneered Gwyn, a princess of average magical powers, who had refused to partake in any of Carnelian's birthday celebrations since Delia's arrival 10 years prior. She loved her brother, but loved tormenting and bullying him so much more. As if being born first and beating her to her rightful place on the throne wasn't hell enough, Carnelian was also born with a rare power that only appeared every few thousand years. This rare and unique magic was called White Fire. Along with the ability to conjure white flames, Carnelian assumed that the white lion cub that leapt from his chest every time he was sad or anxious was some kind of dark omen, a cursed familiar. He assumed this not because the lion cub had ever caused anyone harm, but because Guinevere had said so. The commoners had whispered as much in the taverns late at night. The nobility smiled often in the young prince's presence and treated him with a kind of fearful, piteous respect one might give to a dying animal. But on this day, when Gwyn was at her worst, using the most scathing words she could think of to gut Carnelian, Princess Delia stepped in to stand before him in defense. The white lion cub leapt from his chest and purred loudly, weaving back and forth at the hem of Delia's dress. Witch, Gwyn scoffed. Jealous old hag, Delia shot back. You're 13 now. You should be addressing your brother with the grace and eloquence befitting of his role. Instead, you scar him with that snake's tongue of yours every chance you get. You cause him pain at every turn. Carnelian tried to look manly and stoic behind Delia's back, but she could hear him sniffling as she spoke. He is a kind and gentle boy. His soft demeanor will help him to raise a new generation of people to be better than the last. Our peoples may fear him now, but I promise to make them understand someday. Guinevere laughed in Delia's face, poked her in the chest with a brightly polished purple index finger, and said,
"Ha, that'll be the day."
"Hush," Delia commanded with such authority that both twins stood at attention. Delia turned round to speak directly to her betrothed. "That little lion cub isn't your familiar prince. That is the purest form of your soul. In other words," Princess Delia whipped her head back for a quick glare in Guinevere's direction before she continued, "you have the heart of a lion, the essence of a true king." Gwyn opened her mouth to retort. "Ah, I'm not finished, dear sister-in-law." The sharpness in little Delia's tone made Gwyn twitch. Delia turned to look at Carnelian again, held his hand in her own, and rallied him on even further. "When you are too timid to speak, let your virtue be your voice. Be so rare in your actions and deeds that the rarity of your looks become overshadowed by the rarity of your heart. Fight your demons. Love your enemies. Hold your head high so that all may see your crown. Embrace your destiny. Never forget you are a lion." She turned to Gwyn, curtsied, and went on with her day. Gwyn awkwardly curtsied low to her brother, refusing to lock eyes with Delia, her nemesis. She then turned on her heel, tripping over a mischievously loosened cobblestone as she went on her way. The whole ordeal left Princess Guinevere fuming, but in turn this moment had an impact on the future King of Crown that was so profound it would stay with him until the day he died. Just like the light she was born with, Delia had completely destroyed the shadows of Cornelian's past and pulled him from the darkness of solitude. From then onward, he'd vowed to always protect her and to never leave her side. After learning the true nature of his little lion cub, Cornelian decided to take on the role of a student under the tutelage of the Grand Hermit Merlinite, a retired priest and a man of great wisdom in the art of taming one's soul. He, too, had traveled to these lands from the Rose Quartz dynasty in his youth, and so he knew all too well the inner workings of Delia and Cornelian's astral power. He called them spirit projections, though there was no formal name for these mysterious familiars as the gift was so rare. While Cornelian's subjects feared him, the common folk of Delia's dynasty worshipped and revered those born with the power of spirit projection, and would most likely view Cornelian's albinism as a sign of great holiness. She promised to take him to visit her homeland and introduce him to the wonderful people living there someday. After many lessons with both Delia and Merlinite acting as his instructors, Cornelian's curiosity got the best of him. He asked if he could see the shape of their souls. Merlinite's soul took the form of an elemental being that flickered from one element to the next, depending on the old man's mood. Sometimes it was a smiling body of fire. Other times it appeared as a forlorn body of water. When Merlinite was hyper-focused on his lessons, the being showed itself as a stoic body of lightning. The young royals never got tired of watching the spectacle of change. But Cornelian was much more in awe of Delia's spirit projection. Hers was a gorgeous, pure white angel with sapphires for eyes. She was truly a vision. The lion cub jumped into her arms and fell asleep there until the day's lessons were over. The young ones learned with the passage of time that their souls not only matched well, but were also growing alongside them. And so it was that in the next scene shift, Cornelian's soul was now a full-grown lion. It stood beside the 20-year-old king-to-be, purring loudly as he ruffled its mane. The young prince had won the day by fending off hostile ogre and fairy forces just outside the kingdom's borders, and was now being hailed before all as Cornelian the White Lion Crown. Just as Delia had promised, he had become a warrior adored by those who'd once feared him. And so it was that his status amongst his people had given him the courage to propose to Delia, a silly act mayhap, considering they'd been destined to wed since birth, but a grand gesture all the same. The setting was of extreme importance to Cornelian. It had to be springtime. It had to be beneath the rose-pink cherry blossom trees. Through nerves and anxiety, Cornelian's confession of love went as perfectly as he'd wished, and his beloved accepted with all the joyousness women always dream of. The day of their wedding took place 1 year later on Delia's birthday. It was also chosen by King Tourmaline as Cornelian's coronation day. The crowning of our new king, the birthday of our new queen, and a wedding to bind the hearts of the two? Truly a triad of celebrations, Merlinite said when his former pupil shared the wonderful news. Truly, and that is why, good sir, we beseech your presence thereupon to bind us together with your own words, Delia said, clasping her hands together. Please, Merlinite, it would bring us such comfort for you to officiate our wedding, kind old friend, Cornelian said, clasping Merlinite's hand in his own. The master magician had relinquished his place amongst high society long ago, wishing to wash his hands of the constant greed and disputes he'd witnessed among those at the bottom and those at the very top. He shook his head and waved his hand as if to shoo them away. I couldn't possibly. I stay to my lonesome for a reason, you know. I've seen hell in the likes of others. The life of a priest showed me nothing but the worst of mankind and the silence of our beloved gods when we needed them most. But we are not others, Merlinite. We are your friends. We love you. We want you to share in our happiness. You'll see, the gods will be with us as we walk down the aisle. The gods will be smiling beside us as we take the throne, and we will be seen the realm over as bound forever by none other than you. We will accept no one else. It must be you. The hermit relented and gave in immediately. No one could refuse such genuine warmth. And so it was that Merlinite appeared shaven and dressed in white robes trimmed in gold to reign in a new era of love for his sweetest comrades. Dearly beloved, we gather here today to unite two lovers on this strange journey we call life. Let us bow our heads in prayer to wish Delia Rosecourts and Carnelian Crown a very prosperous and loving Wait! The blushing bride yelled out at the end of the red-carpeted aisle of the outdoor wedding. She held her gorgeous gown up a ways, so as not to ruin such a treasure with grass stains. Everyone stopped and turned to look at her. I demand a duel with the groom. If he wins, the wedding shall proceed, Delia said with a broad, beautiful smile. And if you win? Carnelian asked with genuine bewilderment and curiosity. He wasn't worried, though, for it was this level of mischievousness that he loved most about his future wife. This was yet more proof that their lives would be filled with spontaneous adventure and the spark of love between them would never die. If I win the duel, I relinquish our place on the throne to Guinevere. You cheeky devil, you can't be serious, Gwyn yelled from the outdoor pews with amusement. Since the time of that fateful battle at the border, whence Carnelian and Delia both had saved Gwyn from a mace to the head and a spear to the back, she'd vowed undying loyalty to the two and officially approved of their rightful place as the future rulers of her kingdom. The idea of Carnelian losing might have exhilarated Guinevere in her immature youth, but it honestly horrified her now. She'd learned quickly enough that royal studies simply weren't her thing and that holding the weight of an entire kingdom on her shoulders was a bothersome chore, to say the least. I accept your terms and conditions, my love. Let us be about it, then. Everyone was herded out to the brick-laden arena on the opposite side of the cliff where the wedding was being held. Though they were allowed to choose any weapon from the treasure room, the bride and groom chose identical swords without realizing. Carnelian's was a silver rapier. Delia's was gold. Neither expected the other to go easy on them. Casterlin watched as the two danced a graceful ballet of blades, every strike so much fiercer than the last that sparks of red and white flame flew from the clashing steel. There was a gentleness in their movements, especially when they drew close to one another for melee attacks. At long last, after almost an hour of non-stop swordplay, the two began to tire. Carnelian and Delia had thoroughly ruined their white wedding attire with dirt, sweat, and the pesky grass stains the maids had warned Delia to avoid at all costs. Even her incredibly expensive glass slippers were scuffed and cracked. So much so that Princess Delia's heels snapped and crumbled underneath her, sending her into a blind tumble. Carnelian reflexively moved to catch her before the fall. Your sword may be strong, but my love is stronger. He leaned in for a kiss, and the moment Delia closed her eyes, he swept her legs out from underneath her. He used his white flame to lift her into the air, catching her in his arms in a very fitting princess carry. That was a cheap shot, Your Majesty, Delia said amidst the clapping of onlookers. I know, Carnelian said shyly, and leaned in so that only Delia could hear. But I've been waiting my whole life to marry you, so I had to win. Now, Princess Delia Rosecourts, will you do me the great honor of becoming my bride? Was there ever a doubt in your mind, my king? The crowd went wild with whistles and cheers. Once again, the wedding was on. After the I-do's were said and done, Merlinite gave a tearful speech, something he thought he'd never ever do in this lifetime. Hell truly is other people, but I see heaven and hope in your eyes. You bear your souls to the world and wear your hearts on your sleeves, and for that bravery I am proud of you. Live long, my dearest friends. Live long and be forever happy. With that, the newlyweds climbed the grassy, flower-filled cliffs where the fairy refugees now made their home. Tourmaline bade them both to kneel, anointed them with holy water, prayed lovely prayers over them, and finally placed 2 dazzling gold crowns atop their heads. Queen Delia's life was so beautiful and dreamlike up to this point that Cass couldn't believe this was the same world she'd been summoned to so many months ago. And yet the next scene shift would be the event that set the stage for all that would befall this beautiful royal family in the future. After the wedding, the king and queen postponed their honeymoon to the Rosecourts realm just long enough to undertake a secret project deep in the forest. Every day they left at dawn and returned at dusk. This went on for months and months. It was something only they could do, and Delia forbade the use of magics on their architectural journey. Finally, on the day their project was completed, they ventured out to visit Merlinite deep within his cave. They called for him, and he followed on horseback in a red blindfold. The company of horses halted. Look, Merlinite, a thank-you gift for your many years of service. The old man pulled the blindfold down to reveal a quaint little cottage, made of solid gold. I can't accept this. It's... The royal smiled. Worry not. We've doused the entire area with an invisibility serum that's proven to never wear out, regardless of the passage of time. This is yours along with your most coveted desire for solitude and privacy. Not one for fluff, Merlinite leapt from the horse and hugged Carnelian as tightly as he could. Words could not express his gratitude. As he opened his arms with the intent to give Delia a bear hug as well, Carnelian spoke up. Whoa, embrace her gently, friend. Gently, for she is with child. Scene shift. Carnelian is tossing and turning with excitement in his bed. Delia is perusing the great library for books on parenthood. Carnelian is deep within a dream in which he's speaking to his unborn daughter. No one knows the child's gender yet, but he knows. A father always knows. His daughter is beautiful. Her name will be Fierna. He chose this name. It's an ancient word for a long-dead language meaning fearsome. He loves it. He wrote it down on his nightstand just before bed. He knows that when he wakes up, Delia will love it too. He knows that when he wakes up, Delia will send for some ice to ease his burning fever. He knows he loves his wife. He knows he can't wait to raise his daughter. He knows something is wrong and that his body is on fire. But he's just too enamored by these vivid dreams of his little baby daughter to rouse himself into a waking state. He tells Delia he loves her to the moons and back. He tells his daughter he cannot wait to meet her soon. And then he is consumed by his own white fire, and his consciousness slowly fades away. Casterlin stood watching all of this in horror. She dreamt his dream with him. And then her perspective moved back into his chambers where his body lay burning. His flames had gone out of control due to the sheer excitement of future fatherhood. His elation had consumed him, mind, body, and soul, causing an incredibly rare case of spontaneous combustion, the likes of which no medical practitioner had ever seen. It took hours for skilled water weavers to put the fires out. All that was left were Carnelian's charred remains and Delia's despair. This was the turning point from light to dark for the entire kingdom of Crown, and from then on, nothing had ever been the same. Delia was making her way down the hall, book in hand, when she began to smell smoke. She ran as fast as she could into his room, but Carnelian was beyond help. His body was consumed by the joy and pride in his heart. He felt bliss in his final moments, but to those observing the scene, his was surely a painful death. Delia saw the hint of a beautiful smile before the white lion was reduced to ash. This gave her comfort in her time of grieving. Queen Delia and the entirety of Crown was devastated. All but one succumbed to their grief. Gwyn stood strong in honor of her brother. She would rule until Delia came back to herself. But thanks to Fierna's dark plague magic 3 years later, Guinevere's stint as acting ruler was incredibly fruitless and short-lived. Crown would slowly but surely fall to ruin. I'm here, Casterlin. Come to me. I have much to tell you. Delia's voice snapped Casterlin back into her body. She felt Delia's presence nearby and wasted no time flying out from the King of Wands. She could hear Delia's words echoing inside her head. Beckoning, calling to her. She felt a strong magnetic pull toward the Queen of Wands card. No one noticed her resurfacing from the crumbling card. Everyone was far too engrossed in their own personal fight to realize. She crouched low and quietly stepped toward the face of the card, but it was oddly different from every other card she'd seen so far. In place of an open portal, there was only a mirror reflecting Casterlin's own image back to her. By the gods, she was frail. When had she become so weathered and gaunt? The woman looking back at her was most certainly not the same woman who had boarded that flight to Burbank a while back. Just as she leaned in closer to question, "Is this really me?" a pale arm reached out and pulled her straight through the glass. It did not break, but rather molded to her body like memory foam and snapped right back into a solid once she made it to the other side. She was face to face with Queen Delia Rosecourts. Delia, is Haru? He is, but his soul is unaware. So Haru's soul and Delia's king were one and the same. They found one another across worlds. This gave Casterlin an entirely new perspective of the phrase star-crossed lovers. It also made her heart ache even more than usual for the home she yearned to get back to. So why are we able to communicate like this? Isn't it dangerous? Whatever the consequences, they are still not as dangerous as you remaining in this world with my daughter. When I lived, I had a naturally strong light affinity, and though you wield all the elements of royalty, yours is yet to be determined. We will discuss that in a moment. For now, I will address why you and I are awakened to one another. Casterlin nodded. It was surreal to be face to face with the woman she'd seen so many times in her entranced state. Delia continued in spite of Cass's odd stare. Carnelian passed naturally, peacefully. I passed forcefully, with a heart full of guilt and regret. Haru Akahoshi and Carnelian Crown share the same soul, just as you and I, but Haru's spiritual essence is asleep to the past, as all reborn souls should be, just as yours was meant to be before Fierna spirited you away. Delia's eyes spilled over with tears. Cass instinctively reached out and wiped them away. She then placed her left hand on Delia's cheek, like she used to do when Harumi was sad. "It's okay, don't be sad. Everyone's going to be okay." Delia grabbed her hand and they stood together for a long while, just absorbing the silence, the togetherness. Casterlin had felt so afraid and so alone from the moment she'd arrived on Odensai. Being here now with the other half of her spirit made her realize that Delia had felt much the same in her lifetime, if not worse. That she would traverse worlds, transcend time and space to start over. To escape her own daughter. Cass couldn't imagine how shattered her heart must have been to give up like that. But she made a silent vow to never give up on her own daughter. Harumi was different from Fierna. She was good. Where there was bitterness and hatred in Fierna's eyes, Cass could always find sweetness and unconditional love in Harumi's. Though she thought this, she felt pangs of heartache for Fierna. She was corrupted by her dark affinity, yes, but in the end she was still only a child crying out for help. "Is it possible for me to convince the princess to come home with me? We can start over there. Maybe she'll lose her powers once we get home. Or even her memory. That would be great. She'd have no way to use magic if she didn't realize she could in the first place, right? If nothing else, this entire situation has taught me that anything is possible. Haru and I could integrate her into the family. She's technically Harumi's big sister anyway. Haru and I could file the paperwork and legally adopt." "Stop this nonsense. You don't realize what you're saying." I'm sorry. I'm just trying to help. I want to believe that in spite of all these circumstances, there's a positive solution to all of this." "You are naive, just as I was. This is deeply embedded in both of our hearts, it seems. Hope, that is. I had so much hope that I would find a cure for Fierna's madness when I was alive, but when my body began to develop dark rot, I knew it was all over for me and for the Kingdom of Crown. Upon my death, I had no idea she would spread her despair and misery to every corner of Odensai, and I regret that deeply, but I was powerless to stop her. I loved her too much to end her life. But if I had, I'd still be alive today, and you and Harumi would have never existed to be forced into this cycle of tragedy once again. For your continued suffering due to my own negligence and failing as a mother, I can never atone. But you must swear on our spiritual essence that you will never try to convince Fierna to go to Earth with you. Look around you. You've seen it for yourself. She is the destroyer of worlds." The idea of watching her home planet, her beloved family, suffer the same fate as Odensai made Casterlin's stomach drop. "What would you have me do?" "I would have you become stronger than your opponent. In doing so, we must first assess your magic affinity. Concentrate on the space around you. Change the scenery. Make it your own. Breathe deeply, but don't think about the element forthcoming. Just cast the spells." Cass did as she was instructed and cast as many spells to corrode and reshape the card's interior. "Now open your eyes." She did so, and the beauty of the landscape before her truly took her breath away. Within the span of seconds, she'd terraformed a beautiful green paradise. "Earth. Your affinity is Earth. How wonderfully fitting," Delia said with laughter in her voice. "Now that we know, you must take this ring. Wait, everything I just saw. Happier times, truly. I hadn't lost sight of myself yet. I had one goal, and that was to shape Crown into a land of peace and glory. But peace has a price, and with my lion gone, I lost my ability to lead and mother all at once. I often wondered if my sorrow wasn't the cause for Fierna's unfortunate affinity. And yet, as you've seen, my people suffered even greater neglect than she. Enough of the past. You must focus. Take the Merlinite ring from my white lion's tomb. It will react to the ring I'm giving you now, and thus amplify your Earth affinity. It will protect and vivify the memories locked deep inside you, yours and mine. It will also cause an interesting transmutation to your weaponry. The weapon you wield whilst wearing the Merlinite stones will take on a form specific to your innermost desires in that moment. Go now. We will surely meet again. We have much and more to discuss." Delia nodded toward a ghostly apparition hovering towards an open doorway in a small corner of the card that was all white. A place Casterlin's earth magic could not reach. She magicked tree roots outstretched from the ground to ride over to the apparition and follow him. On the other side of the door he'd led her through, she found herself back at Carnelian's tomb. The apparition smiled and bade her come closer so that he could bestow his gifts upon her. She spread out her wings, flew up to the statue, and closed the gap between them. The kindly ghost held her hands in his own. Merlinite's touch was surprisingly warm in spite of his ethereal nature. If you want to conceal the full extent of your powers from your captor, make all that you wield be not as it seems. He then placed Delia's wedding ring on her left ring finger, Carnelian's on her right. He looked her in the eyes, but spoke only with his mind. "There is no time. Now is all you have. I impart this sacred wisdom to you." She was expecting a long lecture, or at the very least a brief explanation as to how to wield new powers, like a beginner's guide or a new player tutorial. But instead, something much more amazing happened. Merlinite touched one translucent index finger to Cass's forehead, and with a golden shimmering glow, all the knowledge he'd ever accumulated in his lifetime circled into her psyche like a high-speed internet download. Cryptic though the wisdom seemed, Casterlin caught on quickly enough to the visuals flooding into her mind. She knew those words and visions might save her life, and so she kept them close. And from then on, she'd planned on keeping Fiona even closer than ever before. "Hidden strength is the greatest strength," she said aloud. Merlin nodded, and all at once the tarot card and everything therein melted away, leaving Casterlin smack in the middle of the tarot war battleground. Not fazed at all, Cast braced her entire body for the magnificent power she was about to wield. "It's time to finish this." A water soldier pointed his aquamarine spear in her direction and shouted, "She drank the ambrosia!" Ambrosia? As in the nectar of the gods in old mythology? Now what was it that mortals were granted after partaking in divine drink again? A large and brawny merman chucked a trident right into Casterlin's upper torso. It pierced through her flesh, landing in the intercostal space of her ribcage, narrowly missing her spine and beating heart. To her own disbelief, she removed it with incredible ease. The war zone became deafeningly quiet as everyone looked upon this brazen, bleeding mortal returned to cinder. In all the earlier noise and chaos, she'd found time to bind the blazonetta and the trident together. The blazing hot trident honed in on the Knight of Cups and phased right through his skull as smoothly as a knife slicing through butter. The Princess of Cups shrieked as she watched her mate's card crumble into blackened soot and fade away with the desert wind. "All units attack!" And sure enough, as Cass stood in shock, watching the gaping hole in her body seal itself back together, the entire deck of remaining tarot cards rushed to kill her. Which was the worst sin, stealing from the gods or obliterating them one at a time right before their very eyes? All were too blind with rage to care. Everyone wanted the mortal, the princess, and the Lamia to pay. As they encircled the women, pinning them up against the backs of 3 cards with the Blade Dancer's hateful wind, all seemed hopeless. Fierna and Chisei's magic had been nullified when the knights and pages shackled them all with golden restraints. Casterlin fought hard against her captors, immediately breaking her cuffs and chains into millions of tiny fragments. Her wings, eyes, and her entire body glowed with a golden halo of light as she burst skyward. She conjured a celestial golden hammer from the heavens. Magnificent starlight danced all across the weapon's surface. Mesmerized by the sheer size and craftsmanship of the thing, none of the fighters thought to move nor to run. Casterlin threw her hands up as if she were actually holding the heavenly hammer and slammed down as hard as humanly possible. The hammer swung down heavily upon the crowd. The pressure was so immense that all remaining cards crumbled in an instant. Princess Chisei! In her godlike state, she'd completely forgotten the safety and well-being of her comrades.
"We are fine,"
Fierna called up to Cast from behind an equally massive black and purple vortex shield. Fierna's quick thinking had saved them both. With 75 cards obliterated on the spot, only 3 remained. The Sun and Moon cards had melted to become Dark Eclipse, within which Lanier and Lenore had been hiding for the entire duration of the Tarot War. The third and final card, Whisper of the Heart, had a barrier surrounding its entrance and would have to be left for exploration later. Cast flew high into the sky and thrust herself into the moon side of Dark Eclipse. Upon giving chase, Chise and Fierna were thrust into the sun side as the card mischievously flipped about face before they could stop themselves from being pulled in. Immersed inside the sun and the moon's respective memories, the 3 could do nothing but watch as their stories began to simultaneously unfold. Lanier was a young maid who'd fallen hopelessly in love with Queen Delia's personal butler, Lenore. Having both been street orphans found and taken in by Carnelian, Lanier took it upon herself to help Lenore adjust to his life within the castle walls, taking secret joy in watching him succeed in his duties. She'd never told him how much they'd had in common, for he'd assumed upon meeting her that she had been born into a well-off family. Though they were both only 10 when they'd first arrived, Lanier had always appeared to be prim and proper. Quiet and kind-natured, he could never imagine that she too was a child of squalor, raised from the ashes of poverty only by chance. If Carnelian's horse hadn't gone wild and galloped into the filthy alleyway she'd called home, she'd never have lived long enough to acquire such ladylike behavior in the first place. His story was much the same. Carnelian caught Lenore stealing from his steed's satchel during a hunting trip. "Those apples are from my stallion, you know," specifically hybridized, altered and grown to aid in his digestion. The white horse whinnied. Lenore spat the apple bits out immediately. Carnelian continued in spite of the boy's coughing fit. "If, however, you'd like some food fit for a man, come and work for my wife. She's an anxious overworker, and with your help, I'd really like to change that for her. What say you?" Lanier and Lenore took Carnelian's hand those fateful days, and yet both would break the king's trust and their own hearts in the process. As the years wore on, it was clear Lanier had an unhealthy codependent attachment to Lenore. Scene shift. Caste finds herself at the young maid's writing desk, holding a shaking quill in one hand and crumpled paper in the other. The book on the desk flipped open to reveal Lanier's secret thoughts and misgivings. Within the young maid's diary were hateful scribblings which powerfully illustrated her disdain for the queen.
"I was never fussy, even when he fawned over that blue-blooded hussy. I would do anything for my gentle Lenore. At odds are we forevermore. I the nobody, and she the royal whore,"
along with delusional love letters to the man who would never truly see her.
"We are twin flames, and he shines brighter than the rising sun."
But Lanier's sweet childhood poetry had eventually elevated from spiteful to incredibly dark. At one point, the diary mused, she'd gone so far as to carve a sinister limerick into Delia's dress closet, hoping she would see. Casterlan's vision darted back and forth as she read, "Wandering eyes were the cause of my cries. With love and doubt, I plucked them out, and now I have my prize." Lanier, blinded by the sun. Disturbing as it was, Casterlan had already seen much, much worse in her time here. On Fierna and Chise's end, Lenore exhibited that very same obsessive nature for Queen Delia Crown. He was publicly somber during the mourning period of King Carnelian's passing, but privately he was elated. It seemed terrifyingly obvious that Lanier and Lenore were perfect for one another, truly a match made in hell. There was no ache quite like unrequited love. This was absolutely true, but the lengths they would go to, the self-inflicted torture of it all was so terribly sad to see. If only they could have truly loved one another. If only they'd never met. If only, if only, if only. The painful memories were seeping into the onlookers' own hearts, and they too began to feel every twinge of heartache shared between the sun and the moon. The diary was suddenly set ablaze. Footsteps entered the room of memories. "All I ever wanted was to share in the Two of Cups with you," Lanier lamented to the walls as she intruded upon the space, closing and locking the door behind her. She then slowly turned to face Casterlan. In her hand she held a card made of her own magic, the Jilted Lover's card. Fiery stars rose from the card and drove at Casterlan like heat-seeking missiles. "Reversal!" Cass screamed. The stars rerouted and turned on their creator. It was this action from both sides of the cards that revealed the true forms of her adversaries, though only half of their faces had been made visible. Before Fiona's darkness had crept into the hearts of the castle workers, Lenore was innocent, naive, and full of hope for her first love. Lenore was hardworking and loyal. Though he only had eyes for Queen Delia, Lenore found his loyalty to be beautiful and endearing. Knowing he would never love her back only made her heart ache more and more. Lenore felt the very same for his own plight. Hopeless though their loves were, the two continued to agonize and watch one another from afar. Lenore grew to despise the queen. Delia, too busy with her constant work, never noticed Lenore's yearning gaze. She did receive mystery bouquets here and there, but with no card nor signature, she assumed they were from an admiring subject of the lower lands. At first he was besotted, but his love slowly soured over time, and his bitterness turned hateful. Not towards the queen, no. He took his unrequited rage out on Lenore. Eventually, he would come to blame Lenore for every mistake he made. He would accuse her of things she'd never dream of doing just so that he could have a word with the queen directly to discuss how best to correct Lenore's unbecoming behavior. His abuse of power over Lenore ended when they'd become inhuman monsters, and her darkness overtook her. She remembered nothing of her human life, but that she'd hated a woman named Delia, and had loved a man she worshipped like the sun. Her son. She knew only his warmth, and he obeyed only her words. They'd awoken as a pair, rising from a long slumber beneath the desert holding hands. And for a moment her life was bliss, until she'd spotted a woman resembling Delia, and all of her hatred came flooding back along with her shattered memories and severely broken heart. Before she'd become a monster, she'd simply been a young lady starved for love. The same was mirrored in Lenore and his Empress Delia card. His solar flare attacks, which shot from the Empress card's eyes, were thwarted just as easily by Fiona and Chise, and just as Casterlin had done, Fiona shouted, "Deflect!" to turn all of Lenore's rage-imbued attacks upon himself. Delia had taught her many card games using a deck of scrying cards, much like the tarot decks of Casterlin's world, and so the idea of reversal and deflection came naturally to her. Chise, of course, had her own idea on how to attack the enemy. She swallowed the solar flares and spat them rapid fire right back at Lenore. Remembering all the colorful details of their human lives caused them such great physical pain that neither Lenore nor Lenore could dodge the onslaught of return hits. Eventually, they were forced from opposing sides of their Dark Eclipse card by the three fighters. As the card slowly dissolved in a spray of fire and starlight, the sun and the moon locked eyes. As the facade of their inhuman forms melted away in a spray of red and blue glitter, it was as though Lenore was finally seeing Lenore, truly seeing her for the first time since they'd met so very long ago. His eyes were full of pain as he realized how much love he'd wasted on the wrong woman. Lenore had been at his side, cheering him on, loving him in spite of it all. His ugliness, his covetous nature, his jealousy toward a king he didn't even have the right to serve under, a good man, a real man, one he'd so quietly mocked in death. A queen overwhelmed by grief, and a maid with a head full of weddings and fairy stories, a sweet girl who saw him and loved him no matter the cost. His pain became hers, and now here they were at last, neither having ever felt more love than for one another. Real love, mutual and whole. And he'd wasted so much time being so blinded by Delia's vibrant radiance that only now could he see Lenore's quiet beauty. Her poetry, he remembered, was actually quite lovely once upon a time. Her talent with the quill had given her the opportunity to leave her position in servitude to the castle and join any prestigious academy of her choosing, not as a student, nay. She was invited to teach the power of the written word to young aspiring authors and magicians alike, but she declined the wondrous offer in order to stay at Lenore's side. Her joy was in him and nothing else. She was beyond the point of caring about her own future. This pained Lenore greatly. They'd both been blinded by fantasy and speculation, assumptions and wishful thinking. But now that the darkness corroding their hearts was fading away with them, their deepest feelings and most agonizing regrets could be realized and communicated properly to one another. But just as Lenore reached out his hand to grab Lenore's, their bodies began to turn to stone. "Lenore, I love..." Their fingertips had been so close to touching, their love so close to becoming real. Their hardened, statuesque bodies fell from the sky and into a card that had fallen face up onto the desert sands. "We can't let it end this way," Casterlin whispered through tears. And now there remained but one final card, Whisper of the Heart. The sun and moon, having jumped into Dark Eclipse earlier on, seemingly had no arcana cards of their own. Casterland sensed that their codependence upon one another had destroyed their ability to keep their individual realms within separate cards. There had to be a reason for their shared suffering. There had to be a happy ending for them. Cast was determined to make it so. "They're in there, let's go!" Casterland swept Fiona up into her arms and flew into the last card with her faithful summon beside her. The card reverberated, sending the girls backwards a small ways from its entrance. A massive beating heart emerged from within before they could enter, stopping them dead in their tracks. None of them had ever seen a human heart up close before, much less one of such gargantuan size. This is the Heartbreak card. 3 swords, silver, gold, and azure in color, were pierced deeply into it. "We have to pull them out. It's the only way to end their suffering. We must set their hearts free. Ready yourselves, ladies." On the count of 3, they pulled their swords out from the massive bleeding heart. The heart's slow, rhythmic beating began to quicken at an alarming rate until it took its final beat and exploded into oblivion. Casterland and Chise used their large wings to shield the group. All that remained where the hearts had just been were the smiling, fading souls of Lanier and Lenore, wholly human, wholly in love, and now wholly gone from this world. So marked the end of a tragic tale of misled romance. Paper cards rained down upon them, each more peculiar and titled than the last, all burned away when the women tried to grasp them, all but 3 that landed gingerly in their hands. Chise held the dead planet, akin to the world card, but depicting Odensai instead of Earth. Fierna held the Witch of Pentagrams instead of the Queen of Pentacles, depicting an old hag drowning under the weight of greed and gold. Cast's card was the Blind Fool, depicting a jester hugging a hooded figure while they stabbed sword after sword into his back. Foreboding though they were, Casterland cared little for their significance in correlation to each woman. She took them all and closed her eyes to meditate. She refused to go at Fierna's cruel pace any longer. At the rate they were going to reach the desert castle in the sands, she'd die of old age before dehydration. And so she used her inner power to create a new card with these, a much larger card, akin to a magic carpet. Hop on, ladies. Time waits for no one, and the only time we have is right now. Fierna stood wide-eyed and childlike, forgetting her hateful stance for once. She was in awe of the giant floating vehicle, and had never once thought to use her imagination to amuse herself with something as enjoyable-looking as a flying tarot card, nor the 6 pairs of brightly colored fairy wings Cast had sprouted on her back for extra wind flow during the journey. She envied Casterland's beautiful imagination, even if she didn't realize it, and for a moment she wished she could go back in time and become an innocent child once again. "Come on, princess, let's go, go, go!" But that smile of Casterland's, that sunny disposition as she held out a motherly hand to help Fee up onto the card top, it brought all of her anger and hatred bubbling right back to the surface. She quietly took that hand, and spoke not the entire way until Casterland's stomach began to growl a low and miserable growl, leading Fee to kindly offer setting up camp for the night. She had them land in a peculiar spot, where one solitary shriveled-up tree stood in the midst of the barren nothingness. Desert nights were beyond cold, and to Casterland's surprise, Fierna went off on her own to fight the sneaky monsters prowling the land. Not half an hour later, she returned with fur pelts. She magicked away the bloodstains and conjured up a self-sewing needle that had made quick work of the materials at hand to create warm fur coats and blankets for all 3 of them. "Rest now, warrior. You've done so well. I shall scavenge in the morning." "Princess, I know this is sudden to say, but I wanted to tell you. I'm sure your parents would be very proud of you for all of your bravery thus far. Don't you think so?" "My father was weak. He let the white flames consume him. His passion for his country and his beloved wife, they were his downfall." "White flames, my lady?" Casterland asked with a quizzical tilt of her head. She'd had to play dumb, else she'd let slip her full knowledge of the past, her secret meeting with Queen Delia. But it pained her greatly that Fierna would never know that the exciting news of her birth had stoked those unruly white flames, and that her father died in his sleep, consumed with fire for the life he would live with his little princess and his selfless bride. She blamed herself for his death for so long that even if she'd learned the truth, she surely would denounce it anyway. His magic simply overloaded his already weak body, and he died in a blissful dream about his future child and the adventures they would have. But of course, the scene was devastating from the perspective of the queen and the maids who found him burning. burning and burning until the white flame left nothing but ash where he'd lain. Rumors and harsh whispers of the unborn princess's curse soon spread as quickly as the rot within the castle walls. "Cease this useless talk and sleep, Mrs. Akahoshi, please." "Too much light will always cast a shadow," Cass whispered to herself. Then she turned to Fee, on the other side of the campfire. "I want you to know your mother fought for you and that she loved you very much. I know it in my gut." For the fragment of a second, Fiona looked as if she'd been struck down by an arrow. But once she'd regained the usual look of desolation in her eyes, Cass decided to stop talking and rest. Though Casterlin could not understand the full extent of the hate in Fiona's heart, she could absolutely connect with the doubting and questioning, as she had often wondered if her father had felt even an ounce of love for her at any point in his life. The feeling of abandonment had shackled Fiona's heart long before the rotting plague took hold of Queen Delia. Lenore's taunting, the nobles' incessant gossiping, the priest's ominous proclamations of Fiona's affinity, the fearful disdain of the common folk after her father's death, surely these instances contributed greatly to her warped personality. Even still, there would never be a good enough excuse for the atrocities this child of Crown wrought upon her people. And yet, Casterlin had not shaken the hope in her heart that there was a way out of this painful prison for both of them. "I would never abandon my daughter, never ever." She was lying on the ground now, cushioned by a bed of twigs and leaves she'd conjured up with earth magic from her jade wand. "Do you really mean that?" She'd had her back turned from the fire so she couldn't see Fiona's expression, but she did hear trembling and uncertainty in her words, as if she were on the verge of tears. "I do. Harumi means the world to me. She's my everything, and when I go home, I want you to come with me. Join my family. You'll love—" Fiona let out a frustrated scream and warped to Cass so quickly there was no chance of escape. She pulled out her wand and used it to strike Cass in the back, over and over with lightning magic until deep welts and gashes appeared. Her light blue shirt was completely bled through. After an hour of violent writhing and twitching, her body had given way and gone limp long into the attack, but Fiona was far too enraged to notice her care. After another half hour of merciless abuse, Fee grew tired. Huffing and puffing, gasping for breath, she'd finally calmed herself enough to realize the consequences of her actions. She quickly forced a healing tonic down Casterlin's throat, but when just one wasn't enough, she had to administer healing magic. She learned to use it from her mother when she was a child, but it always inflicted great physical pain. Her body was racked with intense muscle spasms as the magic flowed from her hands into her companion's gaping wounds. Before she collapsed from exhaustion, she managed to reset Casterlin's memories from before the Battle of the Moon and Sun. Just like that, all the knowledge and battle-savvy Casterlin had just received from Delia was wiped from her psyche, and she was doomed to continue on following Fiona's violent whims with no recollection of the dreadful abuse she'd endured so many times now. Come morning, Princess Fiona appeared before Casterlin with a tantalizing offer of what appeared to be fried eggs. They'd been subsisting on the wild fruits and vegetables Fiona deemed edible until now, and so Cass accepted the breakfast graciously. "Wow, Princess, what's the occasion?" Cass said enthusiastically before digging in. "Ouch, they're on fire." The eggs weren't spicy, but literally on fire. Being another world, one would expect to eventually adapt to all the absurdities and mysteries therein, but incidents like this never ceased to amaze Cass. "Is this even edible?" "It is, I swear on my throne." "I trust you, my lady," Cass said warily before trying a real bite this time. It was truly painful to eat, but Cass was hungrier than she'd ever been in her entire life, and she figured a health potion would ease the swollen blisters on her tongue afterward anyway. She'd grown slightly addicted to the idea that no matter how much pain she'd endured during her battle training, she'd always have access to a cure. After the meal, she chugged 2 tonics and jumped up feeling refreshed and ready to face whatever Fiona had next. But that refreshed feeling faded within minutes, and yet again the blisters returned. The burning scar on Cass' lips hurt so badly that she was unable to focus hard enough to create her aerodynamic wings. The consequence was a much slower ride through the still desert sands. Though the sun shone brightly in the sky, no movement could be seen nor heard for miles and miles around them as they went along. At least in the last few days they'd managed to, if not see any desert dwellers, hear their calls and cries. Fiona had hunted for skins and furs and even managed to find those peculiar blood-red owl eggs. So then, What was the sudden cause of such deafening silence, such suffocating stillness? Casterlyn began to fear they might never make it out of this hellish landscape and found herself trying to stifle a panic attack when suddenly a great castle erupted from the sands, much like Linear and Lenore had done previously. Was this it? The Mahalian castle of which Ronnie had never been able to come home to? If not, there were answers inside that would surely lead them in the right direction. Forgetting her panic, Casterlyn shouted over the rumblings of the majestic structure as it continued to rise from the ground. "I need to scour the library. I want to go inside, my lady. Please let me venture in. It would be faster if we all searched together, but if you are weary from our long travels, we can have Chisei stand guard out here with you." Cast was perplexed by Fiona's facial expression. "Watch out!" Fiona jumped at Casterlyn, forcing her to bow down as she did so. A giant, dusty stone arm had extended out of nowhere, punching through the air, nearly lobbing their heads off. "Stay down, it's moving!" Fiona shouted as the castle unfolded itself into a walking, talking creature. Its eyes glowed olive green. Its body was reminiscent to Cast of the many mecha shows she watched as a child. The beast fiend's entire body was that of a sand golem, held together beneath the castle structure that sheathed the thing's entire body in armor. Upon closer inspection, when the earth beneath the tarot card finally stopped spinning and quaking from all the sudden crazy movements, Cass noticed the creature had 3 heads and 6 arms, 3 at each side, and yet a 7th arm outstretched from above the middle face's eyes, where the 3rd eye is said to be, according to those versed in esotericism. All 7 arms wielded vivid, brightly colored scimitars. It was clear to Cast from all her studies into the religions and cultures of her earthly neighbors that this beast fiend took the unique form of a Tridevi, a 3-headed goddess. More surprising still, a shrieking bird's cry emanated from the Tridevi's ribcage. There, where the Tridevi's beating heart should have been, perched a gorgeous flaming phoenix within a golden cage. As she squawked and squealed, her enormous peahen feathers rose and fell. She was beating her wings furiously toward the 3 travelers, sending heat waves and fireballs flying their way. Cast had just enough of her wits about her to dodge the attacks. Noting that every attempt to do them harm had failed, the peahen phoenix relaxed onto her perch and spoke directly to Casterlyn. "Phoenix eggs do not hatch for 2,000 years. Today you ate them without a care. I've waited 1,999 years for my babies, and they were to hatch this very day. You took my beloved hatchlings from me. I am Fawn, the great and powerful goddess of renewal and rebirth. I will not tolerate such a grave injustice," screeched Fawn. "You took our beloved mother from us. Thrice, goddess of past and pain, will not stand for your sins any longer," screeched the Tridevi, staring directly down into Fiona's cold and knowing eyes. "And now," the pain pair said in unison, "you are all going to pay." Those owl eggs. But why would Fiona do such a terrible thing? In all the texts and ancient writings based on the legends of the phoenix, they were always seen as sacred birds in every culture. To have sinned against revered gods without realizing, the very idea of what she'd done by eating those eggs made Casterlyn sick to her stomach. She'd eaten the offspring of a divine entity and suffered the burning mark of a heretic as the fateful consequence. As for the 3 faces of the goddess Thrice, there was no doubt in Casterlyn's mind that Fiona knew who they were, or at least who they had been before ascending to godhood. But for the sheer size and anger these godly beast fiends had, it was enough for her to worry about taking them down without getting slaughtered herself. She had fought in many ways thus far, all befitting the medieval era she found herself stuck in, but now she felt inspired to go in a much more modern direction with her attacks. She recalled a series she'd enjoyed watching as a family every Saturday morning until the show's fantastic finale brought the ritual to an end. The show revolved around a cyborg named Data Man, and one of Cass's most favorite features of this character were his photon phaser arm blasters. For her own sake, she'd always referred to them as arm cannons, and she used their beloved 2-dimensional imagery to manifest arm cannons of her very own. Holding out her wand with her left hand, she let the stem grow like tree roots, wrapping around her arm all the way up to her face and neck, down to integrate into her right hand. Once the process was complete, she was fully armored in those incredibly thick tree roots, and her hands looked like they could do some serious damage. She pointed her left arm cannon at Fawn's cage, propping her elbow up for aiming accuracy with her right arm, and let the blast build to bursting before letting her first emerald green photon blast fly. The blast hit its target and the cage rattled violently before returning to its settled position. The Tridevi's rib cage took the brunt of the damage, leaving Fawn exposed to more powerful blasts. The bird opened its mouth and let an equally large ball of fire fly free towards Cast. She accelerated into the air, no wings, only magic shoes propelled by tiny pockets of swirling wind. This wasn't going to be an easy fight unless she took out one opponent at a time. And of course, the thought crossed Casterlin's mind as to whether she could live with herself for killing sacred deities afterwards. And of course, the idea of someday returning to Earth gave her all the resolve in the world to survive at all costs. While she focused all her might on taking down Fawn, Chise and Fierna did their utmost to win against Thrice. Chise stabbed and bit at the right arms of the goddess, while Fierna called forth a Labrys axe, hoping its double-bit build would be able to chop off 2 arms at once. Thrice, however, was a formidable foe in the art of swordplay, and each swing of the Labrys was met with solid steel and flying sparks. Bounding up into the heavens as if it were a simple game of hopscotch, the fleet-footed Casterlin took the opportunity to mimic Fawn's firepower by opening her mouth and shooting a glowing green orb of magic down at the bird. Fawn and Cass' simultaneous attacks connected, causing a seismic explosion. When the dust cleared, neither had a scratch on them. Disappointing, perhaps, but it did help Cass glean some knowledge about Thrice's scimitars. The third-armed scimitar had glowed a vibrant green color identical to Casterlin's current element of choice, and when the blast from her throat radiated through Thrice's body, the third scimitar lost its color. Likewise, when Fawn's fire blast radiated through Thrice's body, the third arm of her right side, which emanated an ember red, also lost its color. Casterlin took a deep breath and then raised her arms to shoot her magic at both scimitars at once. Just as she'd hoped, they'd shattered like delicate glass. After processing the scope of this new development, she opened a telepathic channel of communication between herself, Chise, and Fierna. I've solved one part of the problem for us. Those blades the Tridevi is wielding are enchanted by the power of chakra. In other words, Thrice is manipulating her own life force to wield those impenetrable swords. They're being fed by the elements within her own body, and all we have to do is discern which chakra each sword is drawing from. Once we do that, we must break the swords with our own elemental magic. Now, Chise, I want you to serve as a distraction to Fawn, while Fierna and I break those blades, understood? Try to get her out of that cage. Due to Cass' most recent memory erasure, even the water element was available to her. One by one, they managed to shatter each blade from the root and sacral scimitars to the throat and solar plexus all the way up to the third eye. At last, all that remained was to put both creatures out of commission. Chise had managed to rip through the bars of Fawn's cage and pull her out, forcing her to flee immediately before Chise's gnashing fangs could even take a bite. Fawn found refuge atop Thrice's head, roosting comfortably behind a large golden crown encrusted with sparkling diamonds fit for a goddess such as she. Casterlin conjured the same wind magic she'd created for herself beneath Fierna's dainty slippers so that they could rise up to meet Fawn at eye level. When she opens her mouth, hit her with the ice and water elements. One or both should be enough to take her down. Ready? Casterlin met Fawn's piercing gaze and opened her mouth to form yet another attack. Fawn quickly opened her beak to oppose the onslaught of magic, but her submission to Cass' ruse caused her downfall. Cass closed her mouth, smiled at Fawn's confusion, then quickly flew up high into the sky once again to rain down a powerful barrage of ice and water blasts from her hand cannons. Now, with Fawn frozen solid atop Thrice's head, Cass glided to Fawn, forcing the earth magic all over her body to recede back into her wand, so that she could touch the bird's encasement and the Tridevi's beautiful crown with her own 2 human hands. It only felt right to acknowledge their lives before ending them. A small blue-green peahen rubbed against Cass' hand, urging her to pet the majestic fowl while she told her tale. 2,000 years ago, I was the royal pet, a golden peahen, the jewel of Mahali they called me. I died roosting on my hatchlings. My death was so full of regret that I refused to go willingly, and the gods of Mahali saw it fit to add me to their ranks, and here I am, a phoenix reborn. Our story is much the same, but Fiona will tell you we are the most recent addition to the gods of Mahali. Her darkness made it so, robbing us of our chance to live as we were meant, razing our vast and prosperous kingdom to the ground so that nothing but sand remains as far as the eye can see. Their stories were simple enough to understand, sad enough to empathize with, and so Caste made up her mind to end their suffering and continue on their path towards the truth, towards home. When she'd resurfaced from her trance state, all the chakra scimitars had grown back from their hilts. This was a frustrating development, but nothing the champion of Odensai couldn't handle. At first, she'd conjured 3 elemental bows and given 2 to Fi and Chisei in hopes that an elemental firing squad would do the trick. The bows and arrows morphed from solid stone to molten lava to bitter cold ice to deep sea water and finally into swirling gusts of wind. Each arrow hit its mark on the chakra blades, and all at once the vibrant colors dissipated, leaving rusted old scimitars in their place. But within seconds, the blades would grow back and glow anew. Giving up on this strategy, Casterlyn decided to think bigger. She rose in stature until she could reach out her hand and pluck a beautiful rainbow from the sky. She'd made herself into a giantess, tall enough and strong enough to bend light itself. As she fashioned the rainbow into a bow and arrow, the Tri-Devi stared up in disbelief. She and Fawn were massive creatures in their own right, and had never been diminutive in stature to anyone or anything. Fi and Chisei took Thrice's momentary shock and used it to blast Fawn, though she'd just broken free of her freezing prison seconds earlier, with as much ice as they could possibly throw at her, making each layer of ice so thick she would never be able to escape from within. None of the ladies had any idea if gods and goddesses had any weak spots at all, but fighting blindly was better than standing still and awaiting a painful end at the sharp edge of a holy scimitar. Cass smiled down at her prey as they looked on in fear and knocked 4 elemental arrows. She pulled back and let them fly gloriously into their targets. They exploded into a dazzling array of vivid colors. It was a breathtakingly beautiful scene. When the rainbow prisms dissipated and the sand cloud finally cleared, nothing remained but scorched earth where the goddesses had stood. Casterlyn reached down from the heavens, still as tall as a skyscraper, and grabbed a bloodied phoenix plume and a half-melted locket. The necklace was heavy and made of real gold from chain to charm. Casterlyn began to lose form and shrank down to her normal human size. She clicked the locket open, and there on the right side was a picture of Sultan Ranveer and Sultana Rani, the mother and father of the triplet princesses Delia and Redrick had tried and failed to save. Bhavya the beauty, Kavya the poem never written, Navya the youthful. Kavya, the unborn child stricken by Fiona's dark power, was in the center of the Tri-Devi. Her face had had an eerie transparency to it, and now Casterlyn understood why. The 3 sisters were together at last, souls set free from pain and lingering regrets. There had to be some solace in that. These lost children of Mahali, may they rest in peace. Caste made a left-handed fist and held it over her heart in silent prayer. She hadn't even noticed her action being a custom of Crown. Fiona saw it, though. It was a stance Delia took every night in front of that wretched mirror door. "The dead can rest, Castellan. We need to get going," Fiona said stoically, militant and cold. The girl lacked empathy, and Caste wanted so very much to change that. But, in spite of all her efforts to show love and compassion to the princess, Casterlyn's thoughts were always firmly set on her real daughter Harumi. No matter where Fiona took them next, it was only one step closer to the ultimate goal of getting back home. Unfortunately, the flying tarot card had been singed at the edges, and Fawn's eternal blaze was creeping slowly through all 4 corners. Fiona bade them all to jump on, and take this mode of transportation as far as it could go. The second Cass jumped on, she fainted. The ability to enlarge herself was going to have to be a one-time party trick, as it drained her mana so powerfully she went into an almost coma-like state. "Hold her still! Don't let her fall off!" Fiona ordered Chisei. The summon held Cass' sleeping body against her own and gently stroked her hair, careful to retract her claws so as not to harm the precious cargo. "My protector, my friend." Human words shot through her psyche for the briefest moment, and then the thought was gone and forgotten, overridden by the savage, instinctual thoughts of a beast. As the hours passed, Cast and Chisei's stomachs began to growl loudly. Fierna, who'd been seated at the front of the cart to steer it in the right direction, turned to look at her bedraggled comrades. "Have these!" She tossed some phoenix eggs their way. Chisei caught them as though her hand were a catcher's mitt. She'd held them out for Casterlin, who she'd nudged awake only moments earlier. But Cast turned away. She'd rested and remembered the betrayal these eggs symbolized, the hurt merely looking at them caused. She traced the scars she'd forever have to live with due to Fierna's never-ending cruelty. "You eat them. You need your strength as much as I do." She curled Chisei's talons around the eggs and pushed them back toward her summon. Chisei looked so concerned. "Eat. This is an order from your master," Cass said in a kind and gentle tone. She didn't want to feel her hunger nor her heartache, and she especially didn't want to look at Fierna. So she closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep yet again. Due to her heavy exhaustion, nothing could wake her this time. While in her deep comatose state, she dreamt many dreams and suffered many nightmares. The most agonizing dream was of a woman Cass had never seen before. The woman wasn't speaking, but Cass could feel a great, heavy sorrow emanating from her. She was so sick and so sad. Her face was flushed and full of bitterness Casterlin could not quite understand. This was surely someone's beloved daughter, right? And so Casterlin said to her, not knowing whether she could hear the words nor grasp their meaning, "Someone sees you. Someone loves you. Don't give up." Though obscured by a shroud of black, it seemed as though the woman had stirred, turning her face downward to look for the source of those kind words before closing her eyes and drifting off into another sweet slumber. Had her affirmations of encouragement reached her? The blackness overwhelmed the scene, and then the dream slowly began to fade. Many days and countless hours had passed when Casterlin finally opened her eyes. She came to at the sputtering jolt of Fierna's teleportation magic. "What's going on, princess?" "The card is disintegrating. We're close enough to warp to our final destination. Chisei, hold on to her." Chisei nodded, growled, and hefted Casterlin onto her feathery shoulder. The warping ability shot off dark blue flames at the back of the tarot card like a turbo engine. She warped 3 times but faltered on the 4th as the card burned to ash around them. Fierna warped herself into a sitting position on the ground, legs folded beneath her, Seiza style. Chisei never landed. She merely floated in place, snake's tail flicking back and forth in a happy wagging motion. "You did well," Cass patted her cheek as she praised her. Chisei let her down onto the ground, feeling content. She'd properly protected her master and was ready to take on anything. Simple creature," Fierna said, cheeks flushed with jealousy at all the attention she wasn't getting. Casterlin walked over to the little majesty and helped her up. "You did well too, princess." Cass gingerly kissed Fierna's forehead. She was angry at her still for giving her that scar, for forcing her here, but she knew that appeasing the little devil would be the key to her survival and eventual release from this hell. "Where are we, my lady?"
"You are in my mother's childhood home, the grand gardens of the Rose Quartz dynasty. This is the hunting ground in which you will face your final trial."
The outside of the castle looked as vibrant and pearlescent as it had for thousands of years, but upon entering it was immediately obvious that some form of arson had been at play. The pungent scent of smoke and fire lingered all throughout the inner palace. Cast felt drawn to one room in particular. Within the charred confines of Delia's childhood bedchamber, there sat a thick leather-bound journal atop a black and cherry wood desk. It unfolded and opened right up at Casterlin's touch. Scrawled in meticulously beautiful cursive lettering was a message written by Delia. "This book is for my eyes only. I have sent it off to my mother in hopes I may keep the secret all to myself. 2 conditions must be met in order for this book to open. Condition 1, I have died and the enchantment placed herein has perished along with me. Condition 2, I have decided to abandon the Kingdom of Crown for whatever reason and am now able to access these writings with my own hands." Casterlin flipped to the next page. "I'm fascinated by the voices I hear coming from the hidden chamber I found in the underground caverns of Crown. Curiously, no one else can hear them and think I'm daft whenever I ask questions about the room, but I sense it so strongly. What lies beyond that door has been calling out to me, calling to me and me alone. Perhaps I am too young to venture inside? Perhaps my powers haven't become strong enough to be welcome there yet?" Page flip. Guinevere tried to hurt Carnelian today. She sent hunters after his white lion cub, and he took an arrow for it. His arm is badly wounded. I ran as fast as I could to catch up to him, and when I found him, he was lying in a pool of blood. The scene haunts me. It has shown me how precious my prince is to me. It has taught me that I must become stronger in order to protect the ones I love. And so, after he was sent off to the infirmary, I went to that locked room in the basement, and I knelt and prayed as earnestly and as loudly as I could. Out loud and in my thoughts, I prayed to those swirling hush-hush voices. I prayed for those voices to grant me a reprieve from my life here, if only for a moment. I was fearful of Guinevere, worried for my prince, and homesick for my garden. Once this book arrives home, I'll imbue it with the power to make my garden everlastingly beautiful, with flowers always in bloom. When my heart is heavy like it is now, I shall think fondly of my pink and purple roses, my cherry blossom trees, my dastardly little foxes. Oh, my lovely fox-bloom grove. Page flip. The date written had suddenly advanced many years since the previous entry. Cass kept reading. I've returned home, but only temporarily. I haven't abandoned Carnelian's beloved homeland. I've come for a wellness check of my own people because... Cass took notice of the tear stains that had blotted the ink here. Though the writing was a bit faded, it was still legible enough for her to continue reading. Something awful, frightening, terrible has taken hold of my child this day. I believe her affinity has awakened, and none for the good. She is cursed by darkness. I have sealed her deadliest gift, though it is far too late to have done so now. My arms ache, my body feels heavy, but I forced myself to head to the basement. I forced my trembling hands up. I knelt on wobbly knees, and I prayed harder than I've ever prayed to be granted a reprieve from this life I lead, if only for a single second of solace from this pain. And lo, I pressed my head against the door with tears streaking down my unseemly face. I placed my fingers round the knob and pushed ever so gently. The whispering muses on the other side grew aggressively loud in their chatter, and I fell through into a room with yet another door. The mirror door, I've decided to call it. Within that mirror lies another world. The room did call me to it for all the years I've lived here, but only now, when everything I know and love is being destroyed, has it granted me my peace. The whispering voices have vanished, and all that's left are the strange languages of the humans and animals on the other side of my mirror door. Perhaps this can be my home too someday. Perhaps there are medicines there that can save us from that which my beloved child has unleashed, that which she is inflicted by through no fault of her own. Page flip. The mirror door cannot save us all as I dreamt it would. When I went to my knights and asked them to witness the glorious room with me, the caverns changed completely. The basement room was nowhere to be found. Everything was so different that we eventually wound up lost. I apologized profusely to my men, and the very moment I chose to give up trying to show them my mirror door, our ability to return to the castle above became the easiest route we'd taken all day. Stubbornness prevailing in me, I bade the knights good day and traveled right back down there and entered the room just fine. And so, it is with a heavy heart that I realize no one but I shall ever hold love for this mysterious other world, the one called Earth. It is beautiful and wondrous there, and so very advanced it seems. I've come to long for this world very deeply. I often wish I'd been given life there instead, but I shall pray here. I shall pray here every day, for the powers that be to grant my kingdom, nay, to grant my entire world, a miracle. Blank pages ever after. So this is what Delia had been describing to her upon meeting within the tarot cards. But wait, who is Delia again? What tarot cards? A powerful twinge of pain shot through her head as Cass thought back to a hazy conversation with the blurred visage of the blonde woman who'd written in this precious journal years and years ago. If I shatter the mirror, I'll never make it back home. If you shatter the mirror, you'll be saving your home world. You can't convince her to come with you. She'll destroy everything, whether she intends to or not. That is the nature of her darkness. But if you best her, Odensai will be free of her curse, and you can search the lands for powerful nobility. These nobles may be able to help you reconstruct my mirror. I know it's terrifying, but it's the only choice you really have. Fierna is frightfully lonely and drunk with power. She is a danger that must be eradicated, lest your earth meet the same fate as our Odensai. Now, do what you must. Casterlin's head swam as she reeled with confusion. What were these fragmented images trying to convey? What was this urgency welling up inside of her?
There you are.
When she turned round to face her companion, Fiona swiftly and suddenly grabbed Cass's face, her whole hand covering her eyes, nose, and mouth. Casterlin couldn't breathe. A surge of panic ripped through her, but there was nothing she could do. Her entire body was paralyzed from fear or a wicked spell, or perhaps both.
Now sleep as you always do. It's time to play.
As Cass lay immobile and unconscious, Fiona disguised herself as Harumi. She had done so after reading Cass's memories and decided to enjoy manipulating Casterlin's mind one last time before the final boss. Upon awakening, Casterlin found herself strapped into a virtual reality headset and bodysuit.
You're in, Mommy. The network dive worked,
Harumi said with a malicious grin. Network dive? What do you mean, Harumi? Mommy's head hurts a lot, so she doesn't understand.
Disorientation is normal when you log in for the first time, Mama. It's okay. I got a big ouchie when I first started playing too. But it went away real fast, so you should be okay soon. And then you can choose your fighty stick thingy and we can go on an adventure together. Grandma Cat and Daddy said they'd take us out for ice cream if we cleared this map all on our own, remember? So we gotta do our best to take down the big bad guy.
Using her daughter's speech patterns and mannerisms, Fiona had fully convinced Cass that they were simply playing a VR simulation game in an arcade in Japan, that Daddy and Grandma chose a separate side of the adventure map, and that if she killed the boss quickly enough, the other part of the map would open up and she'd be reunited with her mother and husband so they could all go out to eat together. And to Fiona's delight, she believed every word. Just as the child had said, the painful throbbing in her temples subsided quickly. She took a few moments to learn the ins and outs of her available skills and weaponry before immersing herself in the game. "This is so much fun, Rumi," Cass exclaimed as she jumped and stabbed at the lesser beasts surrounding them with the broadsword she'd found in her equipment interface. Pink sparks blazed from the weapon as she poised herself for a charged spin attack. The area of effect attack took down 12 monsters in one swing. Harumi smiled wickedly but said nothing as she watched on. So much fun indeed. She clapped and cheered for her mother as she continued to take down spawn after spawn of monsters. Eventually, Harumi even joined in. Her attacks were incredibly weak, resulting in only 1 damage per attack. Her weapon was a silver spiral staff which stood at the full height of her body. A perfectly rounded amethyst sat cradled within the spiral's rotating center. It seemed to act as an energy core for Harumi's spells, though she hadn't seemed to grasp the concept of magic imbued within it, choosing instead to smack the monsters atop the head with it. Cass came over to help her unlock the staff's true power. She knelt down beside the little girl, gingerly holding the child's hand in her own. "Hold the hilt of the wand with all your might and think of a big, pretty spell shooting out like a bottle rocket." Cass knew fireworks were one of Harumi's most favorite things to see in the whole wide world. She'd said so herself during last year's New Year's Hanabi festival. And so it was a bit jarring to see Harumi's sweet little face turn intently serious as she concentrated on a sparkling pink slime with fluffy ears and a poofy tail. There was such a deep, dark coldness in those eyes. It chilled Casterlin to the bone. She raised the wand with the accuracy of a trained assassin and let loose an extravagant fireworks display upon the poor unsuspecting slime. It whined in agony before exploding into a shower of glitter that fell down around them like a giant rain. "Impressive," Cass said as the last of the glitter fell away.
"Did I do good, Mama?"
Casterlin smiled and nodded approvingly. "Frankly, I'm shocked by how good you are at this game, my little marksman. I can't wait to show Daddy, can you?" Cass made yet another mental note of Harumi's hesitant confirmation. It was as if Harumi had matured since that morning. She no longer held the sweet, innocent spark Cass loved and adored so much. Perhaps it was simply a byproduct of the game they were playing, causing each user to act as stoically as a true-to-life hero. She herself felt very empowered with a magical weapon in her hands, and so she brushed it off as a pointless and unfounded worry. Striking vipers slithered up to them from all sides and forced them to turn back to back, Cass cutting down one side with Harumi blasting beautiful pyrotechnic marvels at the other. By the time the sun began to sink beneath the horizon to paint the sky with twilight colors, Cast had grown tired and offered to take a break from fighting mob monsters so that they could explore the lovely garden they'd chanced upon as they traversed the game's map. There were pink and purple roses everywhere, long vines, freshly bloomed cherry blossom trees, ivy sprawling all across the outer walls of the large pearl castle. Exotic flora stretched on and on across the horizon. The expansive garden seemed incredibly healthy and well taken care of, despite there being only devilish creatures in the area. Not a human in sight aside from themselves. Perhaps this game wasn't popular? Recently deserted due to a worldwide server shutdown, maybe. But it's all so beautiful, Cast muttered aloud, stopping herself mid-step before accidentally crushing an incredibly fat, bulbous flower. She found the little thing truly enchanting. She leaned down to smell the delightful aroma wafting from this particular flower, but the two open petals quickly curled around it, closing off access. She gently touched the enclosed petals and the flower let out a squeak. Her curiosity turned to surprise as the two petals popped open again, this time revealing a fox-like face within the flower. A poofy little foxtail popped out from the flower's base, and suddenly 4 whole rows of the foxes awakened to stare up at her. Before she could express her fondness for them, Harumi abruptly pulled her back.
Read their data, Mommy.
With an unsettlingly serious face, Harumi tapped at the invisible interface before her, causing a description of the floral fiends to pop up just above their titles and HP bars, which each individually read as Foxbloom, 99 of 99. Their eyes wandered upward to the description screen. Foxblooms, a highly dangerous and spiteful species, emits noxious gas when stepped on. Said gas causes instantaneous confusion and paralysis to offender. Effects can only be nullified with powerful white magic. Healing tonics do nothing, will make yipping noises to lure trespassers into touching them. This action is only safe when their ears are fully unfolded. Do not be fooled by their cuddly appearance. Threat level, deadly. Casterlin was so taken aback by the hidden lethal nature of these cute little creatures that she couldn't help but wonder if this game was even appropriate to play with Harumi. She was so engrossed in the menu board that it hadn't occurred to her that Harumi was only barely able to write her name in both the English alphabet and Japanese hiragana. She often drew her letters and symbols backwards, a trait Cast found rather cute, whereas Harumi's teacher found it rather bothersome, often spending the better half of recess and lunch trying to correct the issue. Let's go somewhere safer, honey. Perhaps there might be treasure inside the castle. Maybe we'll even manage to rescue a princess from one of those towers up there, Come on, sweetheart, let's go. Casterlin was relieved to see Harumi obediently following her instructions to get as far away from those demonic plants as possible. Once they had made their way into the first floor of the enchanting palace, Cast quickly forgot her worries and was thoroughly enjoying clearing every room on every floor to reveal old-fashioned treasure chests full of wonderful loot. That was until they were only a few steps away from the highest tower, having climbed numerous spiraling stairs to reach the open door when a great thunderous clop shook the castle from top to bottom, causing the walls to crumble and the stairs to give way. As Casterlin felt herself slipping and falling, she noticed the faint, ghostly figure of the blonde woman staring out into the garden. The apparition turned to look at her with an incredibly sad and forlorn expression, then disappeared. Harumi shoved a canopy bed out into the middle of the palace floor in order to break Casterlin's long and treacherous fall. Honey, how did you get down here safely? Casterlin jumped from the canopy to check Harumi for wounds. She stood surprisingly still during the motherly inspection, which threw Casterlin into an even worse panic. Talk to me, Harumi. You've been acting strange all day. How did you get down without any scrapes or bruises, honey? Answer me, please answer me. A thunderous and demonic whinny reverberated all throughout the castle, causing even more debris to crumble down around them. Casterlin scooped Harumi up and darted through the palace entryway, out into the garden. It was there she finally caught sight of the perpetrator behind the castle's untimely demolition. The title above the creature's HP bar flickered to several different names, almost too quickly for Cast to see, but she read them all. Help us. Save yourself. Run. The names continued to randomly alternate like the ever-spinning reels of a casino slot machine. Cast stood frozen until the text roulette landed on one final selection. Beast Fiend, Ultimate Sevius. The midnight black Pegasus with red eyes and an electric purple mane bucked and screeched as it charged toward the heroine. If one looked closely enough, they could see grotesque faces of trapped human souls wriggling and writhing, pushing against Sevius' skin in an attempt to break free. Cass gripped her broadsword tightly in both hands and braced herself for what she thought would be her final farewell to this wretched planet. Pain shot through her temple to remind her she was on Earth, simply playing a harmless game. Sevius galloped toward her, broken wings enfolding its back, its silver horn as sharp as a poison-tipped dagger aiming right for her. She parried, but not fast enough. Her coinciding thoughts and memories, her inability to differentiate between what was reality versus fantasy, had caused her foolishly fatal mistake. Blood dripped from her pierced flesh as Sevius slowly and agonizingly removed its bloodied horn from Casterlin's belly. She felt the pain as if it were real. She coughed crimson but stood her ground, never wavering in her resolve to get back home to her beloved family. If she could just lead the damn thing further into the garden, to the place she now realized to be the Foxbloom Grove she'd read about in the mysterious enchanted diary she'd found several hours ago, she could enact a strategy that was sure to inflict serious damage. Purple bolts of electricity shot from Sevius's horn as Casterlin ran through the everlasting garden until at last she wearily and breathlessly reached her destination. She leapt up into the air and stayed levitating there, just above the rows of foxbloom. She intuitively remembered her ability to manifest all sorts of magic through deep meditation, though she couldn't remember who had taught her such a thing, and why it hadn't been available to her earlier in this wretched VR game. The beast fiend Sevius bucked ferociously into the deadly garden and right into Casterlin's trap. She snapped her fingers to cause a sudden torrential downpour, then swiftly glided out of harm's way as Sevius folded on all fours, completely paralyzed by the fatal foxes. While Sevius sat helplessly trapped within its flowery prison, Casterlin magicked special raincoats for Harumi and herself. She then manifested a steel shelter, almost like a standing coffin, just big enough for the two of them to fit under. "Don't you dare move from the spot, Rumi. You'll get burned if you do. Promise me, honey, please." Harumi nodded slowly and stepped back against the steel wall to watch the ensuing battle unfold. Fierna had to put on a frightened face, of course, but beneath Harumi's childlike expression was an unbridled excitement Fierna could barely contain. Casterlin jumped back into the fray, snapping her fingers once again in order to wreak havoc on her struggling opponent. This time, the snapping caused the rain to pound down even harder than before. This time, what fell from the skies was pure acid. Before the kneeling creature could rise up to its full stature, Cass leapt toward the beast's horn, careful to shield her eyes from the acidic raindrops pelting down onto her hood, and began to twist it off with all her might. She envisioned herself being the strongest woman on earth, and magic coursed through her muscles and veins in order to acquiesce to her desires. Sickly and weak as she was, though, this physical strength came at a price, taking a grave toll on her health like no magic had done before. She twisted and pulled with the force of 10,000 soldiers until the horn finally broke free from Sevius's head with a sickening snap. She turned the heavy horn round in her hands and plunged it deep into Sevius's many beating hearts. They exploded all at once in a sickening spray of blood. The title Sevius suddenly changed to Save Us, then disappeared completely along with the HP bar. The horse went down on all fours, anguished souls bursting from within its dying body. To Casterlin's horror, she recognized each escaping soul as a citizen of Crown. Some she remembered only from Delia's shared memories, while many others she recognized as her earlier opponents. All those people she thought she'd freed from despair, weeping and wailing yet again inside Sevius, a winged beast now mutating into the form of a dying woman near and dear to Delia's heart. Lady Guinevere? Just then, a funeral organ sounded off a congratulatory tone, announcing Casterlin's rise to level 100, a hollow victory as Guinevere grabbed Casterlin's hand and sputtered, "Thank you for releasing us. Thank you for saving us. This was all I could do for them. I was trying to keep everyone safe." So that was it. Guinevere used her transformed state as a bastion for lost souls. These monsters Fierna saw fit to torment But it was power over death that Fierna sought most, and now, thanks to Casterlin's unknowing hand, that power was hers to wield. Cass turned to Harumi, whose face was now melting and contorting in truly horrific ways.
I'm Harumi, Mother.
Harumi appeared behind Cass.
I'm Harumi, Mother.
To her left.
I'm Harumi, Mother.
To her right.
I'm Harumi, Mother.
The sweet voice deepened, changing in tone and pitch.
I'm Harumi, Mother.
The visage of her child surrounded her from all sides. A rage-filled scream ripped through the night, and Cass lunged for the source of her anguish. A black and purple dome enveloped the little girl, all clones vanishing the moment Casterlin raised her bare fists to pierce through to her true target. The attacks bounced off pitifully, leaving Casterlin's knuckles bloodied and bruised. She was appalled to notice the blank canvas of Harumi's face bubbling up like boiling water. Fierna's eyes, nose, and mouth burst through the old skin, accompanied by grotesquely sickening sounds. It was enough to make Casterlin's stomach heave. As she leaned forward to retch, a new description menu appeared before her. Foxbloom Grove, Delia's acid rain garden, consists mainly of poisonous foxblooms. Defining floral features include pink and green petals with bright yellow thorns and stem. Upon blooming, a fox-like tail and ears sprout from the blossom and backside of the flower to emit a gaseous poison. In combination with acid rain, the effects of paralysis poisoning will occur. A powerful attack that would subdue even the mightiest of mounts. The great Pegasus Sevius being no great exception. Threat level, murderous. Delia's voice penetrated deep into Cass' psyche as a powerful protective wall encased her thoughts and eased her nausea. You are being purposely misled. It is not the beast fiend Sevius you were meant to defeat. It is your captor. You must remember all that we spoke of, all that Fierna has erased, before you play right into her hands. Bear my armor and remember who your true foe is. The enemy of Odensai, the enemy of Earth, the enemy of all mankind. She who has trapped you here against your will. She who longs to bind your soul, our soul, to her very own. Wake up and remember, Casterlin Akahoshi, before it is too late. Wake up and fight. When the queen's earnest words faded, Casterlin found herself decked out in black obsidian armor, an item transmuted directly from Delia's long-forgotten secret treasure trove. This was a unique, one-of-a-kind item, formerly known as white ivory armor. Delia often donned this attire during street parades when she and the king visited foreign diplomats, or made surprise visits to the common folk, and most often during secret training bouts against Duchess Guinevere. As Cass slowly raised her head, she caught sight of Fierna, still encased in her impenetrable dome, warping to and proceeding to kneel over Duchess Guinevere's battered body. This is the embodiment of my mother's hatred for me, my father's pointless anticipation of me, my subjects' disdain for my very birth. This is Guinevere's final act of defiance, and those, she glanced upward at the thousands of souls floating upward into the atmosphere, the souls of Odensai no longer trapped inside, desperately seeking the salvation you thought you'd be giving them all this time, desperately trying to get away from me. What a beautiful farce this all was. Fierna cackled, a cold and soulless sound. When I first came across Sevius, the creature was merely a pony, and even then, with all my godlike power, I was no match for it. I had no idea she cared for Mother and her people so much. But now that you've killed Aunt Gwen, in your moment of angst, well, I hope it was happy hunting, Mother. Fierna's face contorted into a hideous grin. Before Casterlin could take another step, her roulette suddenly opened up of its own volition, and Chisei burst forth. Amidst the virtual nonsense, Cass's memories of her beloved summon had nearly faded away, but Chisei had always been there, sealed within Cass's roulette by Fierna, fighting tooth and nail to get out. Though she was incredibly tired from her ordeal within the roulette, the fearsome Lamia remained loyal to her master. She flew at Fierna head-on, desperately clawing at the swirling dome surrounding her beloved Casterlin's nemesis. Fierna manifested her large scythe and sliced straight through the summon's mouth. Her bared fangs fell from her gaping maw, causing the ripped skin and exposed sockets to bleed profusely. Refusing to give up, Chisei reeled, then beat the dome with her wings with as much force as she could in her wounded state. Again, Vierna swiped at Chisei, this time lobbing off her precious wings. The blood loss was too great. The stoic summon hit the ground hard, no longer able to move. Casterlin screamed and ran to her Lamia's side to hold and comfort her, as this was all she could do in the creature's dying moments. Chisei held Casterlin's small human hand with her oversized claw and placed something within. It was a tattered plane ticket, seat 2B. She'd been holding on to it since the moment she'd decided to jump. She'd continued to hold on to it as she turned beastly. She'd tucked it away inside her feathers, a small remnant of her lost humanity, without knowing why she felt the need to keep it. And now here she lay, slowly fading away as her human form returned. She wordlessly stared up at Cass as they held one another, as she closed her eyes and breathed her last breath. Embracing Chisei threw Casterlin into a whirlwind of modern memories. They were those of a girl that aspired to sing for the world and unite people in song. From getting her first microphone at the age of 7 to bravely signing her first contract as an idol trainee in an American pop culture exchange program that would ultimately lead to that fateful first encounter with Cast on the airplane that would converge and entwine their lives forevermore. All the screaming and crying in the world couldn't change a thing. Casterlin wearily stood up to face Vierna with a devastating fire in her eyes, one of deep loss, anger, and regret. She was screaming once again, no longer cries of pure agony, but of white-hot rage. She would not, could not die here. She had so many people to avenge, so much to live for still. Harumi's first bike ride, Cass' proposal to Haru, a renewal of wedding vows the second she got home to show her love for him, Harumi's school years, proms, dates, smiles and tears, her beloved fashion designs, Earth's flowers, Earth's technology, everything, all of it. She would never take anything from her home world for granted ever again. She would live in gratitude for the rest of her life and dedicate her every waking moment to being the best mother and wife she could possibly be. And daughter, too. She could almost feel Catelyn's warm embrace enfolding around her. Such thoughts gave her strength now in her darkest hour. Casterlin ran circles around Vierna, shooting a vast array of arrows at her repeatedly. Alas, they broke against the dome of swirling purple energy. She struck out with an iron-clawed grapple hook, hoping to puncture Vierna's cowardly force field. When the claw shattered, she attempted a fierce onslaught of magic rapid firing. Wave after wave of green pyro lights bounced off the shield without leaving a scratch. The moment her wand disintegrated in her hands, she wasted no time materializing her broadsword, now dyed red with the blood of innocents slain by her unknowing hand, and jumped full force into the air, bringing down the broadsword with all the remaining might she could muster. "Why me?" Cass raged as she cycled through her ever-breaking arsenal, repeatedly bashing at the protective spear of darkness. "Because you're you, Mommy. You may look different, but you are Mommy, no matter how I look at you. You brought me into this world, you know. I'm your fault. Does that abate your fears? Does it make you hate me any less for what I've done? No, it changes nothing. I can see it in your eyes." Cass growled with rage, her brow furrowed, her teeth clenched. "Bullshit! Your mother died 6 months ago. You're insane!" "I'm not. Don't say that, Mommy. You abandoned me on purpose. You found Earth through the mirror door just like I did. You hated me then, feared me, just like you do now." She was screaming and crying, desperate as always to be the center of Casterlin's attention, to be heard over the clangs and clashes of Cass' alternating weaponry. Cass knew words would never break through, so she fought with all her strength. "You think you've only been here for 6 months? You honestly believe my mother has been deceased for only 6 months? Don't make me laugh. Time flows differently here than where you are from. Once you realized that, you abandoned me to start over. I've heard you chanting the same disgusting prayer again and again, every night since I was 3 years old. I hated that prayer, but I never stopped loving you, Mommy." "Shut up!" It was in that pivotal moment when Casterlin finally absorbed Delia's soul. Delia pierced through Cass' psyche, putting up an incredibly strong barrier of light to protect her mind while she underwent the chaotic transmutation. "You must act now. There are no more second chances. Farewell, my friend. May you find peace." The light barrier remained just long enough for Casterlin to focus her earth affinity inward. As her magic reserves flooded her body and brain, Delia's spiritual essence was swept away, successfully absorbed into the current of green energy coursing through Cast's entire body. The flood eventually collapsed Delia's light barrier and formed an even sturdier wall of ethereal green vines in its place. The absorption fully combined their light and earth magic to reshape Casterlin's soul. In doing so, her spiritual essence fully reawakened in the form of Rose Quartz Angel Delia, an exact incarnation of Delia's white angel, but with Delia's face. The essence appeared the color of jade, with eyes and wings the color of a rose quartz crystal. With their frayed souls now fully woven back together into the same tapestry, Delia's final days flashed before Casterlin's eyes. Cosmic forces, hear my plea. In pain I cry out for my soul to be free. Plagued by darkness, my daughter is my sin. I pray thee, send me hither, let me start again. Reborn in the light, I relinquish my throne. Unto me a new child, so that I may atone. Cast's head split, memories of her former life flooding in at full force. It was true. Vierna spoke true for possibly the first time in her miserable youth. Time fluctuated at a random pace here, opposing entire lifetimes on Earth. Seconds here could be hours there. Months here could be years there. Grasping both sides of her head in an effort to make the pain stop, memory after memory struck Casterlin as if she were being electrocuted by bolts of lightning. A golden bell encased in a sprawling, spiraling, decadent, luxurious castle, dancing toys, magic instruments, all solid golds and silvers, sweets and roast duck, and ridiculous courses fit for a queen but served to a spoiled brat, while her majesty sat back quietly, secretly trying to starve herself to death in hopes of repenting for the plague her child has unleashed onto her beautiful kingdom of crown. Was I really so frivolous? She, the queen, not me. We're different, she and I. But even still, I can understand why she was trying to pacify her daughter's darkness with riches and overabundance. Such heavy guilt she bore on her shoulders. How incredibly lonely. Hungry, dying, loyal subjects, smiling nobles feeding off the queen's forlorn hospitality like leeches. They think they'll be spared. They are wrong. A commoner child sits huddled up in an alleyway. He watches as his arms turn coal-black with rot and begin to flake, little by little. He knows, as well as the sneering nobles, that his entire body will be swallowed up by this plague soon. But he, and a countless number of those who fell to this disease before him, have no way to know the cause of such misery. Hope dies in his heart, but then a warm hand reaches out and spreads light through his limbs. It grows like vines, encompassing his heart until he feels nothing but a calm sense of joy and restful peace. He assumes he is dying, but when his eyes open, he is healthy and whole, and standing before him is the Queen Mother, the Light-bringer herself. But now her arms are coal-black and aching, a sacrifice willingly made. She smiles, and the commoner child suddenly believes in angels, and that the queen must be the archangel, chosen favorite of all the gods and goddesses. In front of a white door adorned by golden flowers and a perfectly round golden knob kneels the queen. Her body is coal-black up to her neck. She has absorbed the plague from as many crownsfolk as she could, with what little remaining strength she had. She chants that prayer of atonement that her daughter of darkness hates so much, but she has no idea Fierna is watching through a secret passageway, has no idea her anger is growing with each passing night. Light shoots through Queen Delia's fingers as she gently presses her left hand against the middle of the door. It morphs into a mirror, and beyond the looking glass is another world, a world Delia has longed for since her husband's passing, yearned for since the moment her 3-year-old unleashed her darkness upon the entirety of Odensai. She had taken it upon herself to reverse the rotting plague from her suffering people, and had mercilessly blamed herself for not sealing the princess's power as commoners do. But she had listened to the slick and sly nobles in her court and council that had promised not to spread word of Fierna's affinity and wrongdoing, so long as they were treated as kings and queens themselves. And so she offered up all that was hers within and without the castle walls, the treasury, the food, even the sacred temple, her favorite place, all given freely in exchange for her daughter's life. The plague would kill the commoners, the farmers, the fire starters, the water maidens, and in doing so would ensure a quick death for the nobility as well. Once the agriculture withered away, the snow suffocated the fires, and the rivers ran dry. But they hadn't even thought of this chain of events. Educated as they were, the upper class was just too ignorant of daily hardships and too self-absorbed to care for those considered beneath them. And so it went for years. Delia would go into crown after scrying those afflicted in the mirror door. She would use her light affinity to absorb their darkness, healing them completely, then return to her secret room to kneel and pray before the mirror door again and again before heading upstairs to sleep in the pews of the sacred temple where the gods and goddesses could see her. She only felt safe under the watchful eyes of the divine. Only there would she lay her aching body. Only then would she dare to rest her weary soul. Her daughter grew stranger with each passing year. Despite Queen Delia's efforts to raise the child to be kind and self-sufficient, she whined and cried and clinged to the point of crippling codependence. No maid, butler, nor servant was ever good enough to help her with simple things. She would not dress herself, she would not feed herself, and she would kick and slap anyone away unless her mother stepped in to do it for her. The child delighted in hurting defenseless animals, and Delia often found them in her bed when Fierna was having a truly terrible tantrum. This was her darkness affinity seeping through. It was incredibly strong, much too strong for any child to handle. So Delia sealed Fierna's memory of unleashing her darkness out into the world, and once she did, the little girl calmed down a bit. She purposefully focused much of her time and energy on teaching Fierna how to strengthen her other affinities, never mentioning the one seal on her forehead. And as Fierna grew into young adolescence, she became sweet and gentle, and practiced using her lightning affinity most of all to impress her mother. But one night, when Fie was exploring the passageways to stave off her boredom while the queen went into the city, she came upon that cursed little spot. She heard muffled chanting at first, then peeked through the keyhole to see her mother kneeling before a large door. Heat immediately flooded her chest, anger welling up. Mother had lied to her, and lying was a sin. She knew all about sins, as Delia had taken her to the sacred temple every morning to cleanse herself in a ritual baptism of atonement. She didn't like the freezing water she and her mother soaked in. She didn't like the frightening Pegasus fountain that oozed icy water from its mouth in a waterfall of penance, as her mother called it. In fact, the baptism fountain caused her such great guilt and distress, she often awoke screaming in the middle of the night from a horrible nightmare. The fountain had come alive while she was in it, her mother nowhere to be found. It swallowed her whole, pulling her down deeper and deeper into its murky waters. The last thing she'd seen before waking from her night terror were those blood-red eyes and the long silver horn the beast used to pierce her heart. Maybe Mommy had been having the same dream and was praying to the gods to protect her from beast fiends. But no, she heard the word daughter and sin in the same breath, so she leaned in and listened harder. And there it was in that hideous prayer. The truth. Her mother didn't want her. Her mother didn't even want to be queen anymore. She must have done something horrible to make her mother hate her so much. And her head hurt so badly, but she just couldn't recall what she'd done no matter how hard she'd tried. It was then that Fierna had resolved to follow Delia into Crown the next day. It was there that she witnessed her mother kneeling before filth and squalor, letting commoner swine feed off her life force as her skin hardened and cracked like coal. The princess was in a frenzy. She went off to take her anger out on some poor squirrels. Some of her memory had returned at seeing her mother that way, but the final piece of the puzzle was in the blank spot of her childhood, the seal sealed into her skin. She did not leave the pitiful squirrels in her mother's bed as she had done so many times as a tot. No, henceforth, she would be on her best behavior in front of Mother. In front of Mommy, she would be a beacon of light, an angel, a fallen angel. And on Delia's deathbed several years later, Fie begged her mother not to leave her behind. She pleaded that she had been a very, very good girl these past 14 years, and that she was sorry for the blank spot, whatever she had done then. But it wasn't enough, Delia had told her. She cupped her daughter's face in both hands and said, "Your atonement is not enough to save Odensai. You are my sin. I brought you into this world, my child of darkness. Your faults are my own." The miscommunication here would never become clear to Fierna and would ultimately drive her to the pinnacle of madness. Queen Delia never hated her daughter, but she did both fear her and fear for her. The darkness she'd unleashed from within her body was an accident, yes, but the rotting plague it created seeped into the inhabitants of Crown. It wreaked havoc far beyond Crown into neighboring kingdoms as well, until eventually it burrowed into the planet itself. It spread to places far beyond the grasp of one frail woman with the gift of healing light. And it was that knowledge, infused with the fact that Fiona's darkness would eventually come to corrupt her mind, body, and soul, that caused Queen Delia to willingly give her life away to save what few people she could, all the while scrying into a world where not a single trace of magic existed. That which had taken everything she loved away from her, and she found the lack of it to be incredibly beautiful. And with her dying breath, Queen Delia Rosecourt's crown fell through the mirror door and into her next life. Perhaps this was a karmic hell in which the queen's pained yet selfish wish to abandon the princess circled round in punishment, forcing Cass to abandon Harumi now. Casterlin fought these memories with images of Harumi. There was the possibility that these flashbacks of Fiona's suffering were merely being implanted in Cass' psyche to make her succumb to and accept the will of the princess herself. Even if it were true, nothing mattered more than getting back to her life beyond this accursed medieval world. She would not repent for the life she found peace in, but in the span of time it took for Cass to come back to her senses, her fate had already been sealed. Fiona had made her move. She was now dangerously close. Cass' spiritual essence lunged forward and began to act of its own accord, manifesting a light scythe and ripping through Fiona's dome with ease. All that remained with the beast slain and the queen's selfish thoughts laid bare was the grand finale to this grim fairy tale. Every weapon, every skill, every attack Cass had used against Fiona earlier in the fight was thrown right back at her. Fiona's invincible mimicry beat, bruised, and battered Casterlin repeatedly. No matter what attack Fiona used, though, she was incredibly careful not to touch Rosecourt's angel Delia. She kept herself just far enough out of range so that the Rosecourt's angel couldn't do much of anything. Because she had watched her mother so closely, Fiona was aware that one's spiritual essence could not travel too far from the heart whence they came, for fear of causing the heart to stop. Eventually, her battle-weary spiritual essence retreated back into Cass' chest. At this point, her black obsidian armor might as well have been ornamental. Beneath Fiona's fists, many parts shattered like glass. This left much of Casterlin's weak points vulnerable and exposed. Mercilessly, the one-sided fight continued. Fiona watched the disturbing spectacle with relish, and yet Casterlin refused to stay down. Every time she was struck, she slowly stood back up. The look of defiance in her eyes, despite the fact that her greatest trump card had failed, despite the fact that her body was being torn to ribbons, was the final straw for Princess Fiona. Her little game of torture had dragged on for far too long. "Let's end this," she said without a trace of humanity in her voice. A kick to the skull, and all went black. Casterlin awoke believing she was free, safe, home at last. She was wrong. The echo of Fiona's menacing voice told her so. She would have no grand finale. She would be blessed with no miracles, nor given any heroic fanfare. Just before Cass' blackout, Fee had dropped her defenses. She did so knowing full well that Casterlin would lunge at her the moment she lowered her shield. She used that heroic predictability to her advantage, knocking her mother unconscious with a swift, incapacitating kick. Every bone in her body was broken. Her face was scraped, scratched, and mutilated beyond all recognition. Fiona showed a small mercy by not sending her tattered remains back through the mirror door she despised so much. Ironically, she felt the devastation would be far too great for whomever found Cass' body to handle. As if she had any sympathy for Cass' plight at all. The real truth was that she'd already won her prize, and saw no use in letting Cass' family have what was left of her. She could easily mend every bone, restore every trace of beauty in Casterlin's face. "But where," she mused, "is the fun in that, Mommy? Thanks to your valiant efforts in destroying Sevius, Duchess Guinevere's fruitless gatekeeper, the seal on my most potent power has been unleashed at last, the power of death. Shall I tell you my story? I cannot die even if I want to. I created and unleashed darkness unto my people. That is the greatest sin according to the gods and goddesses, written of in our sacred manuscripts. And so the goddess we hold in highest regard, the goddess of favor, possessed my mother's dying body and sealed away the one affinity no human has any control over,
death. My mortality was stripped from me so that I may suffer through the ages."
Casterlin, now with every memory of her time spent in Odensai fully intact, recalled a passing conversation in which Fierna had boasted that immortality was possible but had yet to happen in the history of Odensai, the human history of Odensai. Whatever the goddess of favor had done to Fierna hadn't saved Fierna's humanity one bit. If anything, the punishment of life eternal had only served to corrode the girl's blackened heart yet further still. Would that the goddess had seen fit to let my mother suffer eternity at my side, some small comfort to my misery, but it wasn't to be so. She was not absolved of my crime and suffered death by plague, her mercy being given to the citizens of Crown, also very far beneath her. But that was her will, to put Crown before her beloved flesh and blood. To add insult to injury, she refused to even die by my side. I awoke in the middle of the night and silently followed behind her as she crawled to that wretched mirror door with nary any strength left in her frail body. She took her last breath and fell through right in front of me. I never had the chance to say goodbye to her. Fierna's story aligned perfectly with what Cast had witnessed of Delia's past. My wrath boiled over, and since no one but Mother mattered to me in this wretched existence, I ordered the executioners to kill all citizens until no one was left. When there was indeed no one left, the 2 remaining executioners returned to me. Stupid they thought I was, but I read them, and found they were lying. All of Crown had been evacuated to seek refuge in the neighboring continents that made up our world as a whole, with Aunt Guinevere leading the way. This only increased my rage. I rampaged all across the land, turning every loyal subject of every kingdom into a creature to be slain by my new mother, the one I scried from inside the mirror door, my beautiful champion, my fearless murderer. You've saved me from an eternity of loneliness and boredom. You're such a good listener, too. You've been a most magnificent pawn, and for that I shall reward you with life everlasting. I love you so much, Mommy. We'll be together forever." Then she began to chant an ancient forbidden chant. It was this very spell she'd wrongly read aloud, from an evil tome she'd secretly smuggled from the great library and into her room at the age of 3, trying even then to make her mother stay by her side. Her translations were incredibly rough back then, her accent far too thick. The death magic had backfired then, but Fierna had many years to perfect her wording sense. And so, it was this very spell that would rip Cast's soul from her body and join it with Fi's own, thus leaving the spiritual essence of Casterlin Akahoshi, formerly known as Queen Mother Delia, the Lightbringer of Crown, trapped eternally within Fierna's twisted mind. Epilogue. Casterlin. Casterlin wandered the nightmarish caverns of Fierna's subconscious, all the while speaking to her daughter aloud along the way. She often talked to herself as a means of withholding her sanity. Her words would echo into the empty void, most times only answered by Fierna's maniacal laughter. I dream of the day I'll break free from this hellish mindscape and find my way back to the ones I love. Your birth, the anniversaries, the cookouts, the birthdays, were they real? Am I real? I'm real, right? I was human once. I'm alive. I'm fighting to remember. I no longer possess a body, but I'm here. I have become like Fierna's shadow, the whisper in her ear that pulls her away from Delia's door, her silent sentinel, Earth's unseen protector. Please wait for me. I could never forget you. It's all that I have left, this hope. These small fragments of sanity. Visions of my beautiful baby girl. Has she turned 7 yet, I wonder? I am constantly thinking of these things, thwarting off Fierna's wicked thoughts in favor of my own, these moments of the past that fuel me toward a future with you. But deep down I know that Fierna will never let me go. Epilogue. Harumi. Happy 38th birthday, Harumi, I say to an empty house as I sit back on my lonely couch, drink my way to the bottom of my 10 trillionth bottle, pop what I always pray will be my final pill, and fall into a drug-induced sleep. Just so I can see your face in my dreams, Mom. Dreaming. Ah, there you are. Someone sees you. Someone loves you. Don't give up. You say these words, and as I raise up and open my eyes a bit, I can almost see your face at the bottom of my booze. But then I remember I'm just dreaming. I'm always dreaming of the day I'll break free from this hellish mindset and find my way forward, far away from the ones I love. Far away from the woman who abandoned me so long ago, from the man whose heart died long before his body did, from my sweet grandma that tried so hard to fill the void before leaving a new one. But deep down I know that happy endings only exist in our fantasies, and I'll never be able to stop missing my father, mourning my grandmother, and loving my mother in spite of my pain. Not knowing what happened to Casterlyn will haunt me forever. My love for her is a prison with no bars, but I don't want to leave. I want my mom to return. I want her to fix me and hug me and tell me that she will never let me go.